Hey everyone, welcome to Yellowfan. Today I want to argue that Homer Simpson is not just the funniest character in television history, but the most human one. That underneath every donut, every bad decision, every moment of chaos he has caused, and every disaster he has stumbled into and somehow stumbled out of, there is a complete and fully real person, built from a painful childhood, shaped by loss, driven by love, and trying, in every impulsive and reckless and warm-hearted way available to him, to be enough for the people he cares about. Tonight we are going to go through the entire story. From the lobby where Matt Groening sketched him in 5 minutes, to the farm where he grew up, to the detention room where he first saw Marge, to the miniature golf course where a family began, to the bowling alley he had to give up, to the brother he found and accidentally destroyed, to the mother who came back after 27 years, to the dome he dropped over his entire town because he wanted free donuts, to the bridge he stood on in the snow, to the plaque above his desk that his daughter's photographs turned into something beautiful. This is the whole life, told from the very beginning to the very end, with nothing left out. Before we begin, if you are new here, please consider subscribing. It is completely free and it means everything to this community we are building together. Okay, let us start at the beginning. The man who was sketched in a lobby, the creation of Homer Simpson. Before Homer Simpson ever opened a can of Duff beer, before he ever reached into a box of donuts, before he ever sat down on that famous couch in the living room of 742 Evergreen Terrace, he was nothing more than a rough pencil sketch on a piece of paper. He was drawn in a few minutes in a waiting room by a man who was trying to solve a problem. And the funny thing is, the problem had nothing to do with Homer at all. The year was 1987. A cartoonist named Matt Groening had been invited to meet with a television producer named James L. Brooks. Brooks was one of the most successful people in the TV business at the time, responsible for some of the most beloved shows of the era. He ran a comedy program called The Tracy Ullman Show, which aired on the Fox network, and he wanted Groening to create a series of short animated pieces that would play between the sketches. The plan was simple. Groening would adapt his comic strip, Life in Hell, into short cartoons. The deal seemed ready to go. There was just one problem, and Groening only fully understood it as he was sitting in the lobby waiting to be called in. If he agreed to adapt Life in Hell for television, he would have to give up the rights to publish that comic strip on his own. Life in Hell had been his work for years. It was his creation, his voice, something he had built entirely by himself. The idea of handing ownership of it over to a television studio, even for a good opportunity, didn't sit right with him. So sitting there in that lobby, with the meeting about to happen and no backup plan in place, Groening made a fast decision. He would not pitch Life in Hell. He would create something brand new, right now, before he walked through that door. He pulled out a pencil and started drawing. In the space of those few minutes, he sketched out a family, a father, a mother, and 3 kids. He named them after members of his own real family. His father's name was Homer Groening, so the father of this new family became Homer. His mother's name was Margaret, so the mother became Marge. His sisters were named Lisa and Maggie. The only name that didn't come directly from his family was Bart, which he chose as an anagram of the word. His own name, Matt, was the one he swapped out. When Groening later explained the name Homer in interviews, he was careful to say that very little about the character was actually based on his real father. The 2 men shared a love of donuts, and that was about where the similarities ended. Groening's actual father was athletic, creative, smart, and worked as a filmmaker and writer. The Homer he sketched in that lobby was none of those things. Groening once said that Homer originated from his desire to amuse his real father, and also to annoy him just a little bit. There is also a literary angle to the name. Groening has said in some interviews that he was aware of a minor character named Homer Simpson in a 1939 novel called The Day of the Locust, written by Nathaniel West. He found something about the name that worked on multiple levels. He also liked Simpson as a last name because it contained the word simp, which is an old informal term for a simpleton. The name Homer Simpson was, in a small way, doing the work before the character even had a personality. Homer's middle initial, the J that stands for J, was a deliberate reference to animated characters from the Rocky and Bullwinkle show, specifically Bullwinkle J. Moose and Rocket J. Squirrel. The middle initial in those names was a tribute to the show's creator, J. Ward. Groening borrowed the tradition as a small nod to the cartoons he had loved growing up. Once the Simpson family appeared on on The Tracy Ullman Show, the animators faced a task that turned out to shape everything about how the characters look. Groening had submitted rough sketches, expecting the animation team to polish and refine them into something more professional. Instead, the animators simply traced directly over what Groening had drawn. The slightly loose, rough quality of Homer's design, the round head, the heavy 5 o'clock shadow, the two small curling hairs on top, the thick neck, all of it came not from careful planning, but from a team of artists following instructions too literally. Groening had actually hidden something in Homer's original design. The shape of the hairline, the curve of it across the top of Homer's forehead, was drawn to look like the letter M for Matt. The ear was shaped like the letter G for Groening. By the time the show evolved and the ear was drawn more naturally, the G shape was gone from most official animation, but Groening has said that whenever he draws Homer by hand for a fan, he still draws the ear as a G. The director Mark Kirkland once described the shape of Homer's head as looking like a tube-shaped coffee can with a salad bowl placed on top of it. That description, strange as it sounds, is remarkably accurate when you look at Homer's profile. The family as a whole was designed so that each member would be immediately recognizable in silhouette alone, without color or detail, and Homer's round head and round body made him easy to identify from any angle or distance. Homer first appeared on television on April 19, 1987, in a short called, quote, 3. It aired on The Tracy Ullman Show and ran for less than 2 minutes. In it, Homer and Marge tried to put their 3 children to bed. The whole thing was simple, almost throwaway, but audiences responded to it. Over the next 2 years, more than 40 of these short pieces aired, each one brief and rough around the edges, but each one building up a small and loyal audience that wanted more. Then came December 17, 1989. That was the night The Simpsons premiered as its own full half-hour show on the Fox Broadcasting Company. The first episode was called, quote, 4. In it, Homer discovers that his Christmas bonus has been taken away, tries to earn money as a department store Santa Claus, loses everything he earned at a dog racing track, and then comes home with a greyhound he adopts from the track as a family pet. That dog becomes Santa's little helper, who stays with the family for the entire run of the show. The episode set the tone for everything that followed. It was about a man who was failing, who was embarrassed, who was scrambling to provide for his family in ways that kept not working out, and who ended up coming home with something completely unexpected that turned out to be exactly right. That combination of failure and love, of disaster followed by something that felt like grace, became the heartbeat of the show. The man who gave Homer his voice was an actor named Dan Castellaneta, who had been part of the Tracy Ullman Show cast from the beginning. When the producers needed voices for the animated shorts, they chose Castellaneta and fellow cast member Julie Kavner rather than going through the process of hiring new actors. Kavner became Marge, Castellaneta became Homer, and with him everyone else, because he also voices Grandpa Simpson, Barney Gumble, Krusty the Clown, Mayor Quimby, Groundskeeper Willie, and Hans Moleman, among others. In the early shorts and the first season of the full show, Castellaneta's version of Homer was noticeably different from what it became. He had built the voice on a loose impression of the actor Walter Matthau, a gravelly and tired kind of sound that worked in small doses but was difficult to sustain during the long recording sessions, which regularly ran 9 to 10 hours. By the second and third seasons, Castellaneta had worked out a new approach. He described it as lowering his chin toward his chest and letting his IQ go. The voice that came out was warmer, funnier, more elastic, and capable of carrying a much wider range of emotions than the Matthau impression had been. The process of becoming Homer, for Castellaneta, involves completely setting aside his own speaking voice, which sounds nothing like Homer at all. He has said that he prefers to stay in character during recording sessions and to picture the scenes in his head while performing them, so that the reactions are genuine rather than technical. One of the most beloved lines Homer ever delivered, the moment in a Season 5 episode where he spells smart as SMRT and then immediately corrects himself, happened because Castellaneta genuinely misspelled the word during recording and kept going. The writers heard it in playback and kept it exactly as it was. For all his fame, and Homer Simpson became one of the most famous fictional characters on the planet within a few years of the show's debut, Castellaneta says he is almost never recognized in public. The voice and the man are too far apart. People know Homer's sound, but they cannot connect it to a face, and Castellaneta's natural voice gives nothing away. Over the years, the pay that Castellaneta and the other main cast members received grew significantly. In the early years of the show, each cast member earned $30,000 per episode. By 1998, a dispute with Fox over salaries became serious enough that the network actually began preparing to recast the show entirely. The conflict was resolved, and salaries rose to $125,000 per episode. A second dispute, in 2004, eventually settled at $250,000 per episode. By 2008, the figure had risen to around $400,000 per episode. In 2011, Fox demanded budget cuts, and the cast agreed to a 30% reduction, bringing the per-episode earnings back down to just over $300,000. By late 2024, Castellaneta was listed among the highest-paid voice actors in the industry. The show that grew from that 5-minute sketch in a lobby became, across the decades that followed, one of the most honored television programs ever made. It won a Peabody Award. It received 23 Emmy Awards. Time magazine named it the best television show of the 20th century. In 2002, TV Guide listed it as the 8th greatest television show of all time. Entertainment Weekly eventually placed Homer Simpson at the very top of their list of the greatest characters of the last 20 years. The Sunday Times called him the greatest comic creation of modern time. USA Today in 2007 put him on a list of the 25 most influential people of the past 25 years and used the word people intentionally. In 2000, the Simpson family became the first animated family to receive a star on the Hollywood Walk of Fame. Homer's catchphrase, the frustrated grunt that sounds like "dope," was recognized formally by the English language establishment twice. It was added to the New Oxford Dictionary of English in 1998 and then to the Oxford English Dictionary in 2001. It is, as far as most language historians can tell, the only catchphrase from a cartoon character to have entered a major English dictionary during the same period the show was actively airing. All of this came from a few minutes in a waiting room, a pencil, and a cartoonist who decided he would rather lose a meeting than lose a comic strip. Before we move on, if you're enjoying this analysis, please consider subscribing. It helps the channel tremendously. But the story of Homer Simpson doesn't really begin in that lobby. It begins somewhere far earlier and far more painful, with a boy growing up on a failing farm, with a father who didn't quite know how to love him, and a mother who disappeared one night and never came back, at least not for a very long time. And to understand who Homer is as an adult, as a husband, as a father, as the man who falls asleep at the nuclear reactor and keeps photos of Maggie taped over the plaque that says he's stuck there forever, you have to go back to where he started and see what that boy lost before he ever got the chance to understand what it meant. Section 2. A Childhood Shaped by Loss. Homer's Early Years. To understand who Homer Simpson is as a grown man, you have to go back to the beginning. Not the beginning of the show, not the first episode where he's already working at the nuclear plant and already married to Marge and already the father of 3 kids. You have to go back further than that, to when he was small, to the farm and the mother who kissed him on the head while he was sleeping and then walked out the door and didn't come back. Because almost everything strange and sad and lovable about Homer as an adult can be traced back to those early years, and the show, across dozens of flashback episodes told over many seasons, slowly fills in the picture of what his childhood actually looked like. Homer J. Simpson was born to two people who in the early years of their marriage could not have seemed more different from each other. His father was Abraham Simpson, known to everyone as Abe, a veteran of World War II, a tough and worn-down man who had lived through things that made softness feel like a weakness. His mother was Mona Simpson, a warm and bright woman who worked as a cocktail waitress at a base near Springfield before she and Abe met, and who was, in the early years of Homer's life, a devoted and deeply loving mother. Homer's very early childhood was spent on a dairy farm on rural Route 9. The farm was not a comfortable place, and it did not last long. According to the show's own flashback episodes, Homer was directly responsible for the farm's failure. He had frightened the cows, which caused them to produce sour milk, and without good milk, the farm had no future. The family had to leave. Homer was small when this happened, barely old enough to understand what was going on, but it established a pattern that would follow him for the rest of his life, things falling apart because of something he did without fully thinking it through. Before the farm closed and before things got hard, there were moments that Homer would carry with him forever, even if he didn't always know why. His mother Mona took him and Abe to Woodstock, the famous outdoor music event. Homer was very young, somewhere around 5 or 6 years old. He ended up dancing in the mud with the crowd, completely caught up in the energy of the place, briefly and purely happy in the way that young children can be happy before they understand that happiness doesn't always stay. That memory, though he couldn't have named it at the time, was one of the last memories he would have of his mother for a very long time. Because when Homer was somewhere between 6 and 9 years old, depending on which episode you're watching, Mona left. And the way she left, and the lie that came after it, is the wound at the center of Homer's whole life. Mona had been getting more and more involved with a group of protesters who were working against powerful and dangerous people. The group broke into one of Mr. Burns's facilities and destroyed a collection of experiments he had been running that they considered dangerous and wrong. They got in and did what they came to do, and they were getting out when Mona stopped. Burns had been hurt during the chaos and was on the ground, and Mona, being Mona, stopped to help him. That was her mistake. Burns looked up at her and recognized her face, and immediately threatened to have her arrested. She had to run. There was no time to explain, no time to say goodbye properly. She got back to the house that night, found Homer sleeping in his bed, kissed him on the top of his head, and walked back out into the dark. Homer thought he had dreamed it. What came next was worse than the leaving. Abe Simpson, furious and heartbroken and not knowing what else to do, told Homer that his mother had died. He told him she had passed away while Homer was at the movies. He even went further than that. In one episode's account, Abe took Homer to a grave in the cemetery and told him it was Mona's grave. It wasn't. The grave, as the show later reveals, belonged to Walt Whitman. Abe pointed at a dead poet's headstone and told his young son that was where his mother was buried. Homer believed him. Of course he did. He was a child, and it was his father telling him, and there was no reason in the world to think the man would make something like that up. So Homer grew up thinking his mother was dead. He carried that grief without knowing exactly what shape it was, without knowing how much of who he became was built around that missing person. And later, when the show explores what Mona was actually doing during those decades she was away, it adds another layer of sadness to the story. She hadn't forgotten him. She hadn't moved on as if he never existed. She had been living at a commune called Groovy Grove Natural Farm for some of that time, and she had painted murals of Homer on the walls there. She sent him care packages every week. Homer never received them because he never tipped the person who delivered the mail, and the packages just piled up uncollected. She was trying to stay connected to him in the only ways she could, and none of it was getting through. Abe, meanwhile, became a harder man after Mona left. The show is careful not to make him a total villain, because the truth is more complicated than that. He did sacrifice things for Homer. He sold his own home later in life to help Homer and Marge afford their house on Evergreen Terrace. He used whatever connection he had with Mr. Burns to protect Homer's job at the plant, but he was also verbally unkind to Homer in ways the show documents across many episodes. He dismissed Homer's ambitions, talked down to him, made him feel small on a regular basis. Season 9's Bart Starr episode shows this dynamic clearly, with Abe casually tearing Homer down in the way that a person does when that kind of cruelty has become so normal they don't even notice they're doing it anymore. That steady drip of dismissal left Homer with a deep lack of confidence that he never fully shook. It explains, in part, why he spent so much of his adult life chasing one wild scheme after another, always looking for the thing that would finally make him feel like he was worth something. Season 29's Forgive and Regret adds one more piece to this picture that makes the whole thing even sadder. After Mona left, she had written down pie recipes and left sweet notes behind for Homer. Small things meant to give him something of her to hold on to. Abe found them and tried to throw them away. He didn't want Homer to have them. Whether it was anger or grief or some combination of both, he tried to erase the traces of her. The idea that there were letters from his mother sitting somewhere that his father tried to destroy, letters that Homer never knew existed, says something very specific about the kind of childhood Homer had. There is also the matter of the crayon. When Homer was 6 years old, he shoved 16 crayons up his nose. This is not metaphor. This actually happened in the show's canon. One of those crayons traveled up far enough that it became lodged in his brain, in the part of the brain responsible for thinking and reasoning and understanding. The show eventually explores what this meant in the season 12 episode called Homer, when Homer has the crayon removed as an adult and his ability to think clearly improves significantly. But as a child, no one knew the crayon was there, and no one connected it to the way Homer struggled in school. He was held back in the second grade. He failed classes. He moved through his school years as someone who was always slightly behind, always a little lost, never quite able to keep up with what was being asked of him. Then there was the dead body. When Homer was 12 years old, he went swimming with some friends at a local quarry. While they were in the water, he found a body, a dead body, lying at the bottom of the quarry. And Homer, 12 years old and completely unprepared for something like that, saw it up close. The experience was so frightening and so deeply wrong that his mind did the only thing it could figure out to do with something that terrible. It buried it. The memory went somewhere deep and stayed there, completely inaccessible for years and years. It comes back in the season 13 episode, The Blunder Years, when a hypnotist performing at a restaurant accidentally unlocks it. Homer begins to scream. He screams for an entire night and an entire day. He cannot stop. Once the memory is out, it won't go back in. A later investigation reveals that the body was that of a man named Wayland Smithers Sr., the father of the Wayland Smithers who works at the nuclear plant in the present day. The elder Smithers had died heroically, preventing a disaster at the newly opened Springfield nuclear power plant from becoming something much worse, the same plant where Homer would eventually spend most of his working life. And through all of this, Homer was also drinking. He started in high school. His best friend from childhood was a boy named Barney Gumble, and one afternoon Homer convinced Barney to share a can of beer from Abe's supply while Abe was asleep. Before that afternoon, Barney had been a serious student with plans to go to Harvard. He had been working toward it, preparing for it, genuinely building a future for himself. After that one can of beer, something changed in Barney that never changed back. He took to alcohol so fast and so completely that his plans for Harvard disappeared. He spent the rest of his life as Springfield's most committed drinker. Homer didn't do this on purpose. He wasn't trying to ruin his best friend's chances at a better life. He was just a teenager who thought it would be fun to sneak a beer while his father was sleeping. But the consequence was real, and it lasted forever. By the time Homer reached high school, he was behind in his classes, hungover regularly, and according to the show's canon, he eventually missed almost an entire month of school because of how much he was drinking. He failed remedial science class. He did not graduate. He moved through those years the way a person moves through years when no one is quite watching them closely enough, when the adults in their life are either gone or too caught up in their own pain to notice what is happening. What is remarkable, when you lay all of this out in a line and look at it, is not that Homer turned out the way he did. The overeating, which season 19's Mona Leavesa directly connects to Mona's disappearance, because Homer had associated food with the warmth and safety of being near his mother, and when she was gone, eating became how he tried to fill that space. The drinking, which started as a teenager and never really stopped. The lack of confidence dressed up as recklessness. The desperate need to be liked, which comes from a boy who lost his mother and was made to feel small by his father, and who grew up hungry for someone to tell him he was enough. All of it makes sense. All of it has a reason. What is remarkable is that Homer turned out as warm as he did, because underneath all the noise and all the chaos and all the ways he fails on a daily basis, there is a person who loves fiercely and completely, who will do almost anything for the people he cares about, who has never stopped trying even when trying mostly means making the same mistakes in slightly different ways. The childhood he had could have made him cold. It made him the opposite. It made him someone who needs people around him the way he needs air, who feels everything too much and too loudly, who cannot pass a stray animal or a sad face without wanting to fix it. __quote _6__. That is what the farm and the crayon and the dead body and the missing mother and the dismissive father actually produced. A man with no defenses and an enormous heart, who is about to meet a girl in detention and have no idea what to do about her. Section 3. The First Kiss and the Girl He Never Recognized. Homer and Marge. Before Everything Began. The love story between Homer and Marge Simpson is not a straight line. It is not the kind of story where two people meet, feel something, and move toward each other without confusion. It is the kind of story where two people find each other, lose each other, find each other again without knowing it, lose each other again, and keep circling until eventually the universe runs out of ways to keep them apart. When you put every piece of it together, across all the flashback episodes the show uses to tell it, what you get is something that feels genuinely romantic, not because it is smooth or perfect, but because it is so clumsy and so lucky and so full of near misses that the fact it worked at all feels like something. The very first chapter of the story is one that neither Homer nor Marge knew about for decades. It is told in the season 15 episode called The Way We Weren't, and it reveals that Homer and Marge actually crossed paths for the first time as 10-year-olds, years before they ever sat together in high school detention, years before either of them had any idea who the other one was. Homer, at 10 years old, was sent by his father Abe to a summer camp called Camp See-A-Tree. It was a camp for boys from families that didn't have a lot of money, and Homer was exactly the kind of kid who ended up there. Marge, at the same age, was at a different camp just nearby, one called Camp Landaman, which her sisters Patty and Selma also attended, along with girls who would grow up to become familiar Springfield faces, including Luann Van Houten and Helen Lovejoy. One day at camp, Homer found a retainer that someone had dropped. He returned it to the girl it belonged to, but there was a wall between them in the kitchen area, and he couldn't see her face. She couldn't see his either. She liked him immediately, just from his voice and the fact that he had been kind enough to return what she lost. She asked him to come meet her that night so she could actually see him. Homer said yes. Before the meeting could happen, Homer got into an accident involving a switchblade, which left him wearing an eye patch. Marge, meanwhile, had been trying to iron her hair that evening and accidentally burned it badly enough that she had to dye it brown for the night. Her hair, which was normally the tall, bright blue that everyone knows, was gone. She was a brunette. He was wearing an eye patch. Neither of them looked anything like themselves. Homer gave her a fake name. He told her his name was Elvis Jagger Abdul Jabbar. She never told him her name at all. They met in the dark, both of them unrecognizable, and something happened between them that was real, even if everything around it was accidental. They kissed. It was Homer's first kiss. They made a plan to meet again the following night, and they split up a heart-shaped rock they found, each keeping half. Homer never came back for the second night, not because he didn't want to. On his way back from the meeting, he was so happy, so completely caught up in what had just happened, that he walked straight off a cliff and fell into a lake. He drifted in the water until he ended up at the shore of a nearby fat camp called Camp Flabaway. The people running the camp refused to believe he wasn't one of their campers and strapped him into an exercise machine for hours. By the time Homer got free and made his way back to Marge's camp, she had already packed up and gone home. Her sisters Patty and Selma, who had disliked Homer even at age 10, told him that Marge hated him, which was a lie, but it worked. He stopped trying. Marge waited for him that second night, and he didn't come. She was 10 years old, and she had finally let herself feel something for someone, and he had simply not shown up. She decided she couldn't trust boys, and she kept that decision with her for years. She threw her half of the heart-shaped rock away. It broke into 2 pieces when it hit the ground. Neither of them knew for the next 30 years that the other person was the same one from that summer. He had been wearing an eye patch. She had been a brunette. They walked right past each other's real selves and had no way of knowing. The second chapter of the story begins in Season 2's episode called The Way We Was, and this is the one most people think of first when they think about how Homer and Marge got together. It is 1974. Homer and Marge are both seniors at Springfield High School, and until this point, they have never spoken. Homer was not the kind of student who made a strong impression, for good reasons. He had been skipping class and smoking cigarettes in the boys' bathroom with his best friend Barney Gumble. When they got caught, both of them were sent to detention. On the same day, Marge attended a protest on school grounds where she burned a bra as part of a feminist demonstration. The school sent her to detention for 1 day as a result. Homer was already sitting in the detention room when Marge walked in. He looked up, and that was it. Something about her stopped him completely. He has described the feeling in the show in the way that Homer describes things, which is imprecise and honest at the same time. He was gone before she sat down. The problem was obvious from the beginning. Marge was smart, serious, and hard-working. She was on the debate team and genuinely cared about her classes. Homer was none of those things. The boy Marge actually seemed interested in was a student named Artie Ziff, who was well-dressed, confident, and had no problem speaking in complete sentences about complicated topics. Artie was everything Homer was not, at least on the surface, and Marge was clearly drawn to him. Homer, faced with this situation, came up with the only plan he could think of. He pretended to need a French tutor. He was not enrolled in French class. He had never taken French. He had no need whatsoever for a French tutor. But Marge was kind and responsible, and when he told her he was struggling with the language, she offered to help him. They started spending time together after school. She would go through verb forms and vocabulary with him, and he would sit across from her and try to pay attention to French while mostly just paying attention to her. He joined the debate team because she was on it. He had no interest in debating. He had no particular skill for it. He just wanted to be where she was. He asked her to go to prom with him. She said yes. And then, feeling guilty about the lie, he told her the truth. He wasn't taking French. He had never been taking French. The only reason he had asked for tutoring was so that he could spend time with her. Marge was furious. She had stayed up late to help him. She had sacrificed sleep before an important debate to sit with him and go through a language he had made up a reason to need. She told him the prom was off, slapped him, and walked out. Artie Ziff asked Marge to prom. She said yes. Homer had already paid for everything. He had rented a tuxedo. He had rented a car. He had paid for 2 dinners at the prom event. He decided he was going anyway because he had paid and because somewhere in him he still couldn't fully let go of the idea that the night might turn out okay. It did not turn out okay. He arrived at the Bouvier house to pick Marge up, not knowing that Artie was coming for her too, and had to stand in the doorway while Patty and Selma made fun of him and Marge left with someone else. He drove to the prom alone. He had his prom photo taken with no one beside him. He sat at a table by himself and watched Marge and Artie be crowned prom king and queen. He watched their first dance together. Then he walked out to the hallway, sat down, and cried. Marge found him out there. She had noticed him leave. He told her how he felt, fully and without any strategy this time, just the plain truth of it. She told him she was with Artie. She told him firmly that she had feelings for Artie and that Homer needed to accept that. He told her he understood. She went back inside. After the prom, Artie drove Marge to a place called Inspiration Point. He tried to push things further than Marge was comfortable with and tore her dress in the process. She told him to stop. She asked him to take her home. He drove her back. She got out of the car and stood on the road in her prom dress, and she started walking. Homer was still driving around. He hadn't gone home. He had just been driving through the dark in his rented suit, going nowhere, because going home meant the night was over, and he wasn't ready for the night to be over. He came around a curve and his headlights landed on Marge, standing on the side of the road. He stopped. She got in. The episode ends there. It doesn't show what they said to each other. It doesn't need to. The image is enough. A girl gets into a car driven by a boy who cried in a hallway because he loved her too much to pretend he didn't. And everything that came after, the marriage, the 3 children, the house on Evergreen Terrace, 35 years of television, all of it followed from that one moment on a dark road in 1974. But there is one more piece of the story that didn't come out until much later. In season 15's The Way We Weren't, when Homer finally admits to Marge that she was not his first kiss, the whole childhood story comes out. Marge realizes that the boy from the camp, the one who gave her a fake name and then never came back, was Homer. She had been carrying the hurt of that for 30 years, believing a boy had simply walked away from her. When she finds out the truth, that he fell off a cliff and drifted to a fat camp and was strapped to an exercise machine and desperately tried to get back to her and was lied to by her own sisters about how she felt, she is not immediately comforted. 30 years is a long time to carry something. Homer, to prove that the night at camp had mattered to him all along, reaches into his pocket and shows her his half of the heart-shaped rock. He has kept it his whole life. He didn't know it was her, he just kept it because that night had felt like something real, and he was not the kind of person who threw away things that felt real, even when he didn't fully understand why. Marge looks at the rock. Then she opens a drawer and takes out her half. She had thrown it away when it broke, but she had kept the pieces, for a different reason than his. She had kept hers as a reminder of how much it hurt to trust someone. But she had kept it. The two halves come together and fit perfectly, because of course they do, and Marge forgives him, and the light fades, and that is the complete beginning of the story. From the two 10-year-olds who met in the dark at summer camp and didn't recognize each other in high school, to the seniors in detention who fell in love and almost didn't get there, to the girl who got into the car on the side of the road and changed both their lives completely. Before we move on, if you're enjoying this analysis, please consider subscribing. It helps the channel tremendously. What comes next is where the real work starts. Because falling in love is one thing. Building a life together when you have no money and no plan and a baby on the way and a man who can't hold a job and a woman whose family thinks she made a terrible mistake is something else entirely. Section 4. Marriage, Bart, and the man who begged for his job. Building a family from nothing. The story of how Homer and Marge went from two young people in a rented limousine on a dark road to a married couple with a baby on the way is not a glamorous one. It does not involve a beautiful proposal on a rooftop or a grand romantic gesture that everyone talks about for years afterward. It involves a miniature golf course, a movie about space, a fast food taco restaurant, a lot of things getting taken away by people who wanted their money back, and a man who walked into the office of the most powerful and frightening employer in Springfield and talked his way into a job by promising to be completely spineless. It is, in other words, a very Homer story. The canonical account of this period in Homer and Marge's life comes primarily from the Season 3 episode called I Married Marge. The episode begins in the present day, with Marge possibly being pregnant again and going to the doctor to find out for certain. While she is gone, Homer sits with Bart, Lisa, and Maggie and tells them the story of how he and Marge got married and how Bart came into the world. What follows is a flashback to 1980, and it is one of the most important pieces of the show's history because it establishes the foundation that everything else is built on. In 1980, Homer and Marge have been together for 6 years. They are still dating. Homer is working at a miniature golf course, operating the windmill, and doing the various maintenance tasks that keep a small recreational business running. It is not a high-paying job. It is not a job with a future. But it is what he has, and he and Marge are happy enough, in the way that young couples can be happy when they are not yet thinking too hard about what comes next. One evening they go on a date together. They go to see The Empire Strikes Back at the cinema. Afterward, caught up in the mood of the night, they end up together inside one of the castles on the miniature golf course. A few weeks later, Marge realizes she is pregnant. When she tells Homer, he does not run. He does not hesitate. Whatever fear he must have felt, he keeps it to himself. He proposes to Marge immediately, and she accepts, and they get married at a place called Shotgun Pete's, which is exactly the kind of wedding venue the name suggests. It is not the wedding Marge might have imagined for herself when she was younger. It is not the wedding her sisters Patty and Selma would have chosen for her. But it happens, and it is real, and Homer means every word of it. Now the pressure is on. A wife, a baby coming, a miniature golf job that pays almost nothing. Homer understands, in the way that even Homer can understand when the situation is serious enough, that something has to change. He needs a better job. He needs to be able to provide for his family in a way that the windmill at the golf course is never going to allow him to do. He hears about the new Springfield nuclear power plant, which has recently opened and is hiring. Homer goes in for an interview. It does not go well. The interview is handled by Wayland Smithers, Mr. Burns' right-hand man, and from the start, Homer has almost nothing going for him. The other two candidates being interviewed are members of Smithers' college fraternity, and Smithers is openly favoring them from the moment they walk in. Homer, who struggles to answer the questions being asked of him, and who at one point gets stuck inside a locker while trying to find his way around the building, is rejected. He does not get the job. He tries other things. He takes a job as a door-to-door knife salesman for a company called Slash Co. It doesn't work out. He takes a position as a candle maker at a novelty attraction designed to look like an old-fashioned village, where his job is to make candles the way people did in earlier times. He makes such a terrible candle that a child tourist bursts into tears at the sight of it. The child's parents declare their vacation ruined. Homer is fired on the spot. He tries other jobs, and at least one of the offers he receives turns out to be a scam entirely. All the while, Marge's pregnancy is progressing. The things they had bought for the baby, the small items that make up the beginning of a life for a child that hasn't arrived yet, start to be taken back by the stores and the companies they owe money to. Baby supplies, Marge's wedding ring, pieces of the modest life they had been trying to build together, all of it begins to disappear. The people Homer owes money to are not willing to wait any longer. Homer, standing in the middle of all of this, makes a decision that comes from a genuinely painful place. He decides that Marge and the baby would be better off without him. He is not trying to abandon them in a cold or selfish way. He has talked himself into believing that his failure to provide, his inability to find steady work, his string of disasters and rejections, makes him a burden rather than a help. He believes that the kindest thing he can do for the woman he loves and the child who is about to arrive is to remove himself from the situation so they don't have to carry him. He writes Marge a letter while she is sleeping. He describes his reasoning in the letter, apologizes, and leaves. He finds a job at a fast food restaurant called the Gulp and Blow, which sells tacos, and he starts working there quietly, not telling anyone where he is. Then Patty and Selma get involved. Patty and Selma Bouvier, Marge's sisters, have never liked Homer. From the very beginning of his relationship with Marge, they have made their feelings clear. They find him unworthy of their sister in almost every way. But Selma, on this particular occasion, feels something like pity. She feels sorry for Marge, who is far along in her pregnancy and whose husband has vanished. Patty's position is to say nothing and let Marge find out in her own time. Selma overrules her and tells Marge where Homer is. The moment that follows is one of the most straightforward and honest scenes the show ever gave to Marge. She is heavily pregnant. She has been abandoned. Her sisters are watching. She drives to the Gulp and Blow, walks in, and finds her husband. Homer is ashamed. He can barely look at her. He tells her he cannot give her the kind of life she deserves, that he cannot afford a proper ring, that she should be with someone who can actually take care of her. Marge cuts through all of it with one simple answer. She does not need a particular ring or a particular life. She needs him. Any ring is fine, she tells him, as long as it comes from him. She wants him to come home. What Homer does next requires something from him that does not come naturally. He has to take his pride, which is already very small and very bruised, and set it aside completely. He has to go back to the Springfield nuclear power plant and try again. Not with a normal job application, not with a scheduled interview. He walks directly into the office of Charles Montgomery Burns, the owner of the plant, a man known for his coldness and his complete indifference to the people who work for him, and makes his case in person. The speech Homer gives is not an inspiring one. It is not the kind of speech that gets written down or remembered for its dignity. He tells Burns directly that he will be the perfect employee for him, specifically because he will never cause trouble. He will be spineless. He will do what he is told. He will not push back or make demands. He offers himself up not as someone exceptional, but as someone completely manageable. And somehow, in the specific and strange logic of Mr. Burns's world, this works. Burns gives him the job. Homer becomes a safety inspector at the Springfield nuclear power plant, working in Sector 7G. He gets back to the hospital just in time. Marge's labor has already begun. The delivery moves forward, and then Bart is born. Almost immediately, the baby reaches up, takes Homer's cigarette lighter, and sets Homer's tie on fire. Homer dunks the burning tie into a glass of water, looks at his brand new son, and says he did it on purpose. Marge points out that the baby is 10 minutes old. Homer instinctively reaches out and closes his hands around Bart's throat in the strangled squeeze that would become one of the most famous running gags in television history. The pattern between Homer and Bart is established in the first 10 minutes of Bart's life. They named him Bart. Homer named him. He has said in the show that he always liked the name, and it stuck. Life on Evergreen Terrace began. Homer worked at the plant, Marge ran the house, Bart grew. Then Marge got pregnant again and Lisa was born around 1983. The Season 4 episode Lisa's First Word covers this period, telling the story of Bart adjusting to the arrival of a sister. To make room for the growing family, Homer and Marge moved from their apartment in the lower part of Springfield into the house at 742 Evergreen Terrace. Abe Simpson helped make it possible by selling his own home to give Homer and Marge the money they needed. This is one of the quietly significant facts about the Simpson family's home, the house that the whole show is built around. Abe gave up his own roof to put one over his grandchildren's heads. He never moved back into a real home after that. He went to the Springfield retirement castle. Lisa's First Word is also the episode that ends with the revelation that Maggie, sitting alone in her crib in the dark after Homer has come in and said goodnight to her, speaks her first word. She looks at the door he just walked out of and says, "Daddy." The voice belongs to Elizabeth Taylor, who guest starred for that single word. Homer does not hear it. He has already left the room. Maggie's story and the circumstances of how she came to exist belongs to the Season 6 episode called And Maggie Makes Three, and it is one of the most emotionally rich episodes the show ever made. By the time the events of that episode take place, Homer has managed to do something he had been working toward for years. He has paid off all his debts. Every obligation, every loan, every financial weight he has been carrying is gone. He is free. And because he is free, he does something that Homer Simpson, given genuine freedom, would absolutely do. He quits the nuclear plant. The way he quits is spectacular. He mocks Mr. Burns in front of the entire staff. He physically throws Burns out of the vehicle Burns is riding in. He drives away from the plant while literally burning a bridge behind him, which in Homer's case means an actual wooden bridge, which he actually sets on fire as he crosses it. He is done, and he wants everyone to know it. His dream job, the thing he had been quietly wanting for years, was to work at a bowling alley. He gets a position at Barney's Bowlorama, run by Barney Gumbel's uncle. He makes less money, but the environment is warm and friendly, and the work makes him genuinely happy. He learns the rhythms of the place with complete enthusiasm, describing in the episode how he slowly mastered the deep mysteries of the alley, including where the pins go after they are knocked down. He is, in this job, in his element. He tells Marge he has worked out a careful plan for their money. Everything will be fine as long as nothing unexpected happens. He says this with full confidence on the same evening that he and Marge go out together and, as a result of that evening, Marge becomes pregnant with their third child. Marge knows immediately that Homer going back to a higher-paying job is now unavoidable. She tries to keep the pregnancy from him as long as she can, knowing how much this job means to him. But Patty and Selma find out, and they cannot resist. They call the two biggest gossips in Springfield, and within 1 hour, the entire town knows. People keep congratulating Homer on the street. He thanks them warmly, assuming they are congratulating him on the bowling alley job. He does not understand what is happening until he comes home and walks into a baby shower. He tries to save the bowling alley job by bringing in more customers. In his attempt to draw people in, he fires a shotgun outside the building, causes a panic, brings a massive police response to the scene, and loses the job immediately. He has to go back to Burns. He has to beg for his position at the plant. Burns lets him have it back. He also has a large sign installed directly above Homer's workstation. The sign reads, "Don't forget, you're here forever." Homer comes home from the plant that day in the lowest mood he has been in for a long time. He walks in to find that Marge's contractions have started. He takes her to the hospital. Maggie is born, Homer is handed his new daughter for the first time, and she reaches out and wraps her tiny hand around his thumb, and he falls completely in love with her, the way he has fallen in love with each of his children, immediately and without reservation. In the present-day framing of the episode, Bart and Lisa notice there are no baby pictures of Maggie in the family photo album. They ask Homer where the pictures are. He tells them the pictures are where he needs them most. The camera moves to Homer's workstation at the nuclear plant, the sign Burns had installed above his desk. The photographs of Maggie have been placed over the letters one by one until the sign no longer reads, "Don't forget, you're here forever." The remaining visible letters, surrounded by pictures of his youngest daughter's face, now read, "Do it for her." It is the simplest thing the show ever did, and also one of the greatest. Before we move on, if you're enjoying this analysis, please consider subscribing. It helps the channel tremendously. But the man who built this family did not do it alone, and the person who held it all together while Homer was falling apart and putting himself back together again and again was standing right beside him the whole time. And the man who employed him, the man whose name was above the door of the place Homer spent most of his waking life, knew almost nothing about him at all. Section 5. The Man Who Never Remembered His Name, Homer and Mr. Burns. There is a running joke in The Simpsons that is so consistent, so perfectly maintained across so many seasons and so many episodes, that it stops feeling like a joke and starts feeling like a statement about something real. The joke is this: Mr. Burns, the man who owns the Springfield nuclear power plant, the man who signs Homer's paycheck, the man whose building Homer has walked into and out of for decades, almost never remembers Homer's name. Not sometimes, not occasionally, almost never. Homer has worked for Charles Montgomery Burns for the better part of his adult life. He works in Sector 7G. He sits at a control panel monitoring a nuclear reactor. He has been directly involved in multiple crises at the plant. He has crossed paths with Burns in the hallways, in the parking lot, in Burns's own office, in Moe's Tavern, at baseball games, at bowling alleys, at formal dinners, and in situations that no reasonable person could forget. And yet Burns looks at him with the blank, faintly confused expression of someone trying to place a face they have never seen before. Burns has called Homer by wrong names. He has looked straight through him. He has, in several episodes, referred to him simply as "that man," or "the large fellow," or used descriptions that make it clear he has processed Homer as a piece of the furniture rather than a person with an identity. The show plays this as comedy, and it is funny, but underneath the joke is something pointed. Homer spends the majority of his waking hours in a building owned by a man who does not know he exists. He gives his days and his health and his attention to a job that the person at the top of the whole operation cannot connect to a face. This is not accidental. The writers of the show chose Burns as Homer's boss specifically because the contrast between the two men says something true about the world. Burns is ancient, enormously wealthy, completely insulated from the consequences of anything he does, and totally disconnected from the human beings whose labor keeps his plant running. Homer is the opposite of all of those things. He feels everything, he has nothing saved, and the consequences of his actions land on him immediately and heavily. Putting these two men in the same building and making one of them technically responsible for the other's safety was a choice designed to produce both comedy and something that looks a little like social observation. Homer's official title is Nuclear Safety Inspector. He works in Sector 7G. He monitors a control panel that manages activity connected to the reactor. He is, by every account the show provides, completely unqualified for this position. When he first got the job, he talked his way in by promising to be spineless and obedient, not by demonstrating any relevant knowledge or skill. A surprise inspection of the plant at one point turned up 342 violations. The estimated cost to fix everything and bring the plant up to the standard it should already be at was $56 million. Burns refused to spend the money. Homer has fallen asleep at his post so many times it has become one of the show's most reliable images. There is a specific gag the show has returned to across multiple episodes in which Homer uses a toy drinking bird, the kind that dips its head into a glass of water repeatedly due to the way it is built, to press a button on his control panel while he sleeps. The bird does Homer's job while Homer does nothing at all. The reactor hums along. Springfield remains standing. This is partly a joke about Homer's laziness, but it is also, if you think about it for more than a moment, a genuinely alarming observation about the kind of people who end up in charge of things that matter. The most important thing Burns ever did for Homer, and Burns did it without knowing the full weight of what he was doing, was simply not firing him. Homer has made enormous mistakes at the plant. He has caused problems that should have ended his employment immediately and permanently. He has been fired and rehired multiple times over the course of the show, but the pattern always resolves the same way. Burns eventually takes him back. The show eventually explains the deeper reason for this through a reveal connected to Abe Simpson. Homer discovers that the reason Burns has never permanently gotten rid of him, despite the staggering number of times Homer has given him cause to do exactly that, is that Abe Simpson once went to Burns on Homer's behalf. Abe used whatever connection and influence he had to appeal for his son's protection. Burns, for reasons that may have as much to do with his strange and ancient sense of obligation as anything else, honored that appeal. The man who was too cold to remember Homer's name was, in some quiet way, keeping a promise made to Homer's father. Homer, when he learns this, thanks Abe. Abe tells him it was just what any father would do. The relationship between Homer and Burns runs through many different registers across the show's long history. In some episodes, it is purely about power, with Burns using his wealth and position to make Homer's life difficult in ways that Homer has almost no ability to fight back against. In Season 5's episode Rosebud, Burns becomes obsessed with recovering a childhood toy, a stuffed bear named Bobo, and Homer ends up caught in the middle of Burns's desperation. In the famous two-part episode, Who Shot Mr., Burns's decision to block out the sun over Springfield so that residents are forced to use more electricity from his plant makes him the enemy of the entire town, and he ends up shot. The person who shot him turns out to be Maggie, who had been struggling with Burns over a bag of candy he tried to take from her. Burns had reached down and attempted to steal candy from a baby, and the baby shot him. In other episodes, the dynamic is almost the opposite of antagonistic. Homer and Burns have gotten drunk together at a baseball game and behaved like old friends. They were on the same bowling team in the season 7 episode Team Homer, in which Homer organizes a team called the Pin Pals, and Burns eventually joins, despite being so physically weak that he can barely roll the ball to the end of the lane. Burns is a genuinely terrible bowler, but the team still wins because their opponents are so distracted by him that they cannot focus on the game. In Season 14's episode called CE, Homer manages, through a complicated series of events, to actually take ownership of the nuclear plant away from Burns entirely. He becomes the new owner. His first act in this role is to push Burns off the office balcony so that the assembled employees in the parking lot can carry him away. Burns and Smithers flee to another country. Homer then discovers that running a company is a miserable experience. The responsibility of being in charge means he has to be at the plant constantly. He cannot watch television. He cannot spend time with his family. He cannot do any of the things that make his life worth living. He gives the plant back to Burns. Burns' revenge is to drug Homer unconscious and start bricking him up inside a wall in a cemetery, like something out of a very old, scary story. The problem is that Burns is so elderly and physically frail that by the time Homer wakes up, Burns has only managed to lay a few rows of bricks. Homer simply steps over them and goes home. One of the most deliberately uncomfortable episodes in the show's history, the Season 8 episode Homer's Enemy, introduces a character named Frank Grimes, specifically to examine what Homer's life looks like from the outside. Grimes is a man who has earned everything he has through years of hard work and discipline. He grew up with nothing, put himself through school, became genuinely skilled at his job, and arrives at the nuclear plant full of the specific anger that a person feels when they have done everything right and still ended up with less than someone who has done almost everything wrong. Grimes cannot understand Homer. He cannot understand how a man who falls asleep at his desk, who has barely any useful knowledge about the machine he is supposed to be monitoring, who has stumbled through his career on luck and the indulgence of people around him, has the life he has. A house, a family, a car. He once went to space. He met a former president. He has had adventures and opportunities and experiences that a man like Grimes, who actually tries, has never come close to. It is not fair, and Grimes is not wrong that it is not fair. Grimes becomes more and more focused on Homer, more and more consumed by the injustice of it, until he completely loses his grip on his own behavior. In the end, he dies. He has been watching Homer carelessly handle things at the plant without suffering any consequences, and he decides to prove a point by doing the same. He grabs live electrical wires with his bare hands, the way Homer has done and survived multiple times, and he is electrocuted. He dies making a point about how unfair it is that Homer gets away with everything. At Frank Grimes' funeral, the gathered mourners are somber and respectful. Homer falls asleep in his pew and begins to snore loudly. Everyone laughs. The episode ends there. The writers intended this to be an uncomfortable ending, and it is. It is the show looking directly at one of the things it had been doing for years, the premise that Homer can do almost anything and walk away from it without permanent damage, and asking what that means from the perspective of someone it is not happening to. The answer the episode gives is not a comforting one. The world is not fair. Effort does not always win. Sometimes the person who stumbles through life asleep at the wheel just keeps going, and the person watching in outrage is the one who ends up paying the price. What keeps Homer from being simply a symbol of unearned luck is the specific way the show grounds him in love and in damage. He is not getting away with things because he is special or because life has decided to reward him. He is getting away with things partly because of blind luck, and partly because the people around him, Marge most of all, are absorbing the consequences he doesn't feel. Burns not remembering his name is funny until you add it to the crayon in the brain, and the mother who left, and the father who knocked him down, and the dream job he had to give up because another baby was coming. Then Burns not knowing who Homer is starts to feel like just one more item on a list of things Homer has accepted and kept moving past. Homer has, over the course of the first 400 episodes of the show, held more than 188 different jobs. Burns's plant is the one he keeps coming back to. It is not because he loves it. The plaque above his desk tells the truth about how he feels about it. Don't forget, you're here forever. He covers it with pictures of Maggie and goes on. The plant is gravity. Everything else is a dream he has for a while before gravity pulls him back. And the strangest part of Homer's entire working life, the thing that sits underneath all the jobs and the schemes and the firings and the rehirings, is that buried somewhere in the rubble of his relationship with the man who doesn't know his name is a thread connecting him to his father, to a quiet act of protection that Abe performed on his behalf, to the idea that even the people who didn't know how to love Homer were, in their own broken ways, trying. __quote _9 ___. But there is another person in Homer's story whose love was far less complicated than that, and whose disappearance shaped him more than any job or any boss ever could. And the day she came back into his life is one of the most emotional days the entire show ever put on screen. Section 6. The Mother Who Came Back. Homer and Mona Simpson. There are episodes of The Simpsons that are funny. There are episodes that are clever. There are episodes that are sharp and biting and full of jokes that land hard and fast. And then there are episodes that are something else entirely. Episodes that slow down and get quiet, and ask the show to do something it doesn't always do, which is to sit with a feeling and not rush away from it. The Season 7 episode called Mother Simpson is one of those. Many people who have watched The Simpsons across their entire lives will tell you, without hesitation, that it is one of the greatest things the show ever made. Not one of the funniest, one of the greatest. To understand why that episode hits the way it does, you have to remember everything from Homer's childhood. You have to remember that his mother kissed him on the head while he slept and walked out the door when he was somewhere between 6 and 9 years old. You have to remember that Abe told him she died at the movies and pointed at Walt Whitman's grave and called it hers. You have to remember that Homer spent his entire life carrying the grief of a loss that was real in its effects, but built on a lie. He grew up without a mother, and he never stopped being the boy who lost one, even when he was a grown man with children of his own. The episode begins with something small and silly, which is how the best Simpsons episodes often begin. Homer fakes his own death to get out of a mandatory community service obligation. He sees the announcement of his death in the newspaper and finds the whole thing quietly pleasant. Then he goes to visit his own grave at the cemetery because Homer is the kind of person who would do that, and he accidentally falls into the open hole where the headstone has been placed. A woman walking nearby in the cemetery sees him lying in the grave and scolds him firmly for disrespecting the memory of her son by lying in his resting place. Homer argues back, because Homer always argues back. They look at each other. It is his mother. The moment of recognition is handled with complete care by everyone involved. Dan Castellaneta, who voices Homer, plays the realization not as a loud shock, but as something quieter and more devastating. The specific way a person reacts when they encounter something they had completely stopped believing was possible. Mona Simpson in this episode is voiced by Glenn Close, whose performance gives the character a warmth and a sadness that makes her feel fully real from the first line she speaks. Homer holds his mother and cries. The show lets him cry without turning it into a joke. It does not cut away to something funny. It does not undercut the moment with a gag. It simply stays there with Homer and his mother in the cemetery and lets the feeling be what it is. Mona then has to explain everything. She tells Homer the full story of what happened the night she left. She had been involved with a group of protesters who were deeply opposed to the dangerous experiments that Mr. Burns had been running at one of his facilities. The group broke into the building with the intention of destroying those experiments and stopping what Burns was doing. They got in, they did what they came to do, and they were in the process of getting out when Mona made the mistake that changed the rest of her life. Burns had been hurt during the chaos of the protest. He was on the ground. Mona stopped to help him because that is the kind of person she was. And while she was crouched down trying to assist him, he looked up and saw her face clearly. He recognized her. He threatened immediately to have her arrested. She had no choice but to run. She got back to the house that night and went to Homer's room. He was asleep. She kissed him on the top of his head, which Homer had always thought was a dream, because children who are kissed by their mothers while sleeping tend to fold it into the soft fabric of a dream rather than hold it as a memory. Then she walked out, and she kept walking, and she spent the next 27 years as a fugitive, moving from place to place, living under false names, never able to come home. The show reveals, in this episode and in others that come after it, pieces of what Mona's life actually looked like during those decades. She spent time at a place called Groovy Grove Natural Farm, a commune where she lived among people who shared her values. While she was there, she painted murals of Homer on the walls. Large, careful paintings of her son's face, made by a woman who could not be near him, but could not stop thinking about him either. She sent him care packages every single week without fail. Homer never received any of them, because he had a habit of not tipping the person who delivered his mail, and the carrier eventually stopped bothering to bring his packages at all. They piled up somewhere, uncollected, for years, while Mona kept sending them and Homer kept not knowing they existed. Back in the present of the episode, Homer brings Mona home to meet his family. He introduces her to Marge, to Bart, to Lisa, to Maggie. The family is startled but welcoming. Marge, who understands immediately what this moment means to Homer, even if she cannot fully measure it, treats Mona with kindness. Homer takes his mother around Springfield. He brings her to Moe's Tavern and introduces her to his friends. He walks her through the town he grew up in, the town she has not seen in almost 3 decades. And you can see in the way the episode frames these scenes exactly what Homer is doing. He is showing her who he became. He is trying to give her as much of his life as he can in whatever time they have, because some part of him already knows, without saying it out loud, that time is the thing they have the least of. Then Mr. Burns sees her. He is at the post office, and she is there too. And he looks across the room and recognizes the face of the woman who broke into his facility 27 years ago. He calls the authorities immediately. The FBI is contacted. Mona has to run again. The scene where she leaves is one of the most carefully constructed endings in the show's history. Mona says her goodbyes to the family. She and Homer stand together outside the house, and she gets into the vehicle that will take her away from Springfield, and Homer watches her go. The episode's final image is of Homer sitting alone on the front steps of the house after everyone else has gone inside, looking up at the night sky. He does not speak. He does not move. The camera holds on him for a long moment, and then the episode ends. There is no joke at the end. There is no button, no punchline, no gag to release the tension of what just happened. Just Homer, sitting outside in the dark, with everything he just found, and everything he just lost, sitting on him at the same time. The episode won significant praise from critics and has remained, across the decades since it first aired, one of the most frequently cited examples of The Simpsons operating at the very peak of what the show was capable of. It treats Homer not as a bumbling fool, but as a fully real human being with a genuine interior life and a wound that never properly healed. It gives him something, and then it takes it away. And it trusts the audience to sit with that without needing it softened. Mona returned in subsequent episodes after Mother Simpson. In one, Homer fakes his own death again, and Mona hears about it on the news and comes back to Springfield to visit the grave, which leads to them accidentally reuniting when Homer, who is hiding in the grave, falls in. She spends time with the family again. She and Abe see each other for the first time since she left, and the meeting is full of old anger that neither of them has fully let go of. Abe is furious at her for leaving. She is furious at him for telling Homer she was dead and for trying to get rid of the notes and recipes she had left behind for her son. In another episode, a message in a newspaper leads Homer to find Mona in a diner. She is arrested there, taken in by the authorities who have been looking for her all these years. She is eventually found not guilty of the main charges against her, but she is then sent to prison over a much smaller issue, having signed her name falsely in a federal park. Homer tries to help her escape, which leads to a chase involving a bus that ends in what appears to be an explosion. The last time Homer sees Mona alive is in the season 19 episode called Mona Leavesa. She has come back to Springfield again, and she stays with the family for a period. During this visit, Homer and Mona have real conversations, real moments together, the kind of ordinary closeness that they were never able to have when he was growing up. Then she dies, quietly in her sleep, without drama or spectacle, surrounded by the family she spent so much of her life trying to find her way back to. She passes away the same way Homer himself once thought he might die, in the season 2 episode where he believed he had eaten bad fish and had only one day left. That episode ended with Homer sitting by the fireplace with his family around him, peaceful and together. Mona's death mirrors that image almost exactly. The show did this on purpose. The season 19 episode also makes explicit something that had been suggested across many earlier episodes. Mona's disappearance from Homer's life when he was a small child was directly connected to his relationship with food. Homer had associated eating with his mother. The warmth of her presence, the safety of being near her, had been wrapped up in the experience of sharing meals and treats and the small daily pleasures of being fed by someone who loves you. When she left, that warmth went with her, and Homer spent the rest of his life trying to get it back in the only way he knew how, which was to keep eating. The emptiness that food was filling was never really about food at all. It was about a boy who lost his mother and never found a way to stop being hungry for her. Season 29's episode Forgive and Regret adds one final piece to the picture of what Homer lost when Mona left. Abe, in the anger and grief of her disappearance, had tried to destroy the things she left behind for Homer. The pie recipes she had written out, the sweet notes she had tucked away for him to find. Abe had tried to get rid of all of it, to erase her presence from the house and from Homer's life. Whether this came from cruelty or from the kind of blind pain that makes people do destructive things they later cannot explain, the effect was the same. Homer grew up not knowing those notes existed. He grew up not knowing she had been trying in every way available to her to stay connected to him. What Mona Simpson's story does to Homer's story is give it a foundation that makes everything else make sense. The overeating that the show had been treating as a simple character trait for years turns out to have a real origin. The way Homer grabs onto people and things with that complete and immediate devotion, the pig he adopts, the dog from the racetrack, the friends at Moe's, the family he holds so fiercely, All of it is the behavior of someone who knows from the very earliest age what it feels like to have a person simply not be there anymore. He attaches completely and quickly because he learned young that attachment is not guaranteed to last. And underneath all of that, underneath every episode where Homer does something foolish or destructive or baffling, is the boy who thought he dreamed his mother's kiss, who stood at a grave in a cemetery that was not hers and believed a lie he had no reason to question, who went decades thinking he had been left by someone who was actually painting his face on walls and sending him packages that never arrived. He got her back, eventually. Not fully and not for long enough, but he got her back. Before we move on, if you're enjoying this analysis, please consider subscribing. It helps the channel tremendously. And there was someone else Homer lost and found. Someone who came from a completely different direction. Someone he didn't know existed until a heart attack in a retirement home changed everything. That story involves a famous face, a car that destroyed a company, and one of the most painful endings the show ever wrote before it came back and made it right. Section 7. The Half-Brother He Destroyed, Herb Powell and the Homer Car. There is a particular kind of story that The Simpsons told best in its early seasons, and it is the kind where Homer's defining qualities, his impulsiveness, his enthusiasm, his complete inability to think more than one step ahead, are placed in a situation where those qualities have real and lasting consequences for another real person. Not consequences that reset by the next episode, not damage that gets quietly repaired between scenes, actual, permanent, life-altering consequences that the show sits with and takes seriously. The story of Herbert Powell is that kind of story, and it remains one of the most emotionally complete things the show ever did with Homer's character. It begins, like many important things in Homer's life, with Abraham Simpson. The Season 2 episode, called "Oh Brother, Where Art Thou?", opens with Abe having a heart attack. He is taken to the hospital, and lying there in the bed, confronting the real possibility that he might not have much time left, he decides to tell Homer something he has kept secret for Homer's entire life. Homer has a half-brother. His name is Herbert Powell. He is the son Abe fathered with a woman he met at a carnival before he ever married Mona. The woman was not someone Abe had a relationship with. It was a brief encounter at the carnival, and the result was a child that Abe never raised and never told Homer about. Herbert was given up for adoption. He grew up in an orphanage without the kind of stable family background that most people take for granted. He had no wealthy parents to help him through school, no connections to open doors for him, no safety net of any kind. Everything he built himself, working his way through his education on his own terms, earning each step forward through effort and discipline, and a relentless refusal to accept that where he started had to determine where he ended up. By the time Homer finds out he exists, Herb Powell has become the owner and head of Powell Motors, one of the largest car manufacturing companies in Detroit. He is rich. He is successful. He lives in an enormous house. He has achieved, by any external measure, everything that a person could want from a life. He is also, when we meet him, clearly lonely in the specific way that people are lonely when they have built something impressive and have no one close enough to share it with. Herb is voiced in this episode by Danny DeVito, and the casting is one of the best decisions the show ever made. There is something in the physical shape of DeVito's voice, warm and rough and quick, that matches Homer's own energy in a way that makes the family connection feel completely believable. When the two men meet for the first time, the joy between them is immediate and genuine. Homer has never had a brother. Herb has never had a family. They look at each other and they both feel, without having to say it, that something that should have existed all along has finally arrived. Herb invites Homer and the whole family to come and stay with him in Detroit. The house is everything the Simpson home on Evergreen Terrace is not. It is large and beautiful and full of things that cost money Homer has never had. Bart and Lisa explore it with wide eyes. Marge is gracious and kind. Homer walks through it in a state of quiet amazement, trying to absorb the fact that his brother lives like this. And then Herb tells Homer why he brought them there. He has a plan, and Homer is at the center of it. Herb explains his thinking carefully. Powell Motors is struggling. The American car industry is under serious pressure, and Herb's company needs something new. Something that connects with regular people in a way that the cars being produced by the big manufacturers are failing to do. His idea is to let Homer design a car, not an engineer, not a team of designers who have spent years studying what people want. Homer. Because Homer, in Herb's view, is the average American. He is not a focus group. He is not a set of survey results collected by a research team. He is a living, breathing, completely authentic example of what an ordinary American man actually is. If Homer designs a car that he himself would genuinely love to drive, then the millions of people in the country who are more or less like Homer will want to buy it. It is, as ideas go, one that makes a certain kind of sense if you squint at it from the right angle. It is also, as anyone watching the episode immediately understands, a catastrophically bad idea. Homer is given complete creative control. He works with the Powell Motors design team, who are professionals with years of experience, and he ignores every suggestion they make. He is not being difficult on purpose. He simply has a very clear picture in his head of what a perfect car looks like, and he pursues that picture with the kind of single-minded determination he almost never applies to anything else. The car Homer designs is a monument to every self-indulgent, impractical, contradictory desire he has accumulated over a lifetime of driving cars that were never quite right. It is enormous. The size of it alone makes it impractical for normal roads and normal parking spaces. But Homer does not think about normal roads and normal parking spaces. He thinks about what would feel good. He gives it a separate dome area in the back, specifically for children, sealed off from the front of the car so that the noise children make cannot reach the driver. This is, from Homer's perspective, a reasonable and even generous feature, since a significant portion of his driving experience involves being distracted and annoyed by the sounds coming from the back seat. From a manufacturing perspective, it is a nightmare. He gives it a horn that plays a Mexican folk song at full volume. He gives it enormous tail fins. He gives it a very large engine. He gives it multiple cup holders because Homer has always felt strongly that cars should have more cup holders than they typically do. He gives it a bubble dome roof. He gives it a special compartment for storing bowling balls. By the time the design is complete, each individual car costs $82,000 to produce. Powell Motors makes the car. They call it the Homer. They put it into production and send it to dealerships. The price at which it must be sold to cover its manufacturing costs is so far beyond what any regular person would or could pay for a vehicle that almost no one buys it. The company, which was already under pressure, cannot survive the losses. Powell Motors collapses. Herb loses everything: his house, his company, his money, his position. All of it gone. He goes from being the head of one of the largest car companies in Detroit to being a man pushing a shopping cart down a highway with everything he owns inside it. The show does not soften this or skip over it. It shows Herb in his new circumstances, and it is genuinely sad, in a way that sitcoms almost never allow themselves to be when the comedy has just been running at full volume. The confrontation between Herb and Homer on the front lawn of the Simpson house is one of the most direct and painful scenes the show gave Homer in its early seasons. Herb does not dress it up. He tells Homer clearly and without cushioning it that Homer has ruined him. that everything he built over his entire life, everything he worked for and sacrificed for and earned through his own effort from a starting point of nothing, is gone. That Homer's existence in his life has cost him everything he had. Homer is devastated. He stands there and takes it because there is nothing else to do. He did not mean for any of it to happen. He genuinely, completely did not intend to destroy his brother. He was just being Homer. He was doing what Homer always does, which is pursuing what he wants with total enthusiasm and no awareness of where the edges are. But this time the ground fell away before he reached the edge, and someone else went through the floor. The episode ends with Herb walking away and Homer watching him go and having no idea how to make it right. That is where many shows would have left it. The lesson delivered, the damage documented, the episode closed. But The Simpsons came back to this story in the season 3 episode called Brother, Can You Spare Two Dimes? And the return is just as important as the original episode. By the time of this follow-up episode, Herb has been living without money or stability for long enough that the experience has changed him in some ways and not changed him at all in others. He has not given up. He has been working, quietly and persistently, on something new. He has invented a device that he believes will be genuinely useful to people. A machine that is designed to translate the sounds that babies make into understandable words. The idea is that parents, who are often at a loss trying to figure out what their infant is communicating, could use the device to actually understand what the baby wants or needs. He comes back to Springfield with this invention and he goes to Homer. He needs money to move forward with producing and selling the device. He needs a financial partner to get it off the ground. And the person he has chosen to ask is the man who destroyed his previous company. This says something important about Herb. He is not coming back to humiliate Homer or to collect on an old debt in a punishing way. He is coming back because, underneath everything that happened, there is still the family connection that existed before the car and before the collapse. He has come back because Homer is his brother, and because in some fundamental way, Herb has not let what happened close that door permanently. Homer has $2,000 from a workplace settlement with the nuclear plant. It is not a large amount of money. In the context of launching a new product, it is barely anything. But Homer gives it to Herb. He hands over the entire settlement without holding back a portion for himself, or negotiating terms, or asking what he gets in return. He gives his brother what he has. The baby translator works. Herb demonstrates it using Maggie, and the device accurately communicates what Maggie is trying to express in her baby sounds. The product is a success. Herb gets his fortune back. He rebuilds everything he lost. He buys himself a new yacht. And then he goes to Homer, and he tells him something that the show earns completely because of everything it put both of them through to get there. He tells Homer that he is no longer his brother. He is his brother again. Full forgiveness, a restored relationship. The specifically clean kind of ending that real life almost never offers, but that feels, in this case, completely right rather than cheap, because the show made you feel the damage before it gave you the repair. The story of Herbert Powell matters to the larger story of Homer Simpson for a specific reason. Herb is the answer to a question the show never quite asks out loud, but poses through the structure of their parallel lives. The question is what Homer might have been if things had gone differently. Herb started with even less than Homer did. No parents, no home, no safety net of any kind. He worked his way to the top through discipline and focus and drive. Homer started with a difficult childhood, but had a family, had Abe, had the structure that Herb never got. And Homer became the man at the console in Sector 7G who uses a toy bird to press buttons while he sleeps. The show does not judge Homer for this. It does not present Herb as the superior version of what a Simpson man could be. It simply puts both of them on screen and lets you look at them. Two men from the same line who went in completely different directions and who need each other in different ways than either of them fully understands. What Herb found in Homer, even after the car, even after the collapse, was a brother. And what Homer found in Herb was something he had been missing without knowing it, a person who chose him, not because of circumstance or obligation, but because of what they were to each other. ___, quote _ 11 ___. He would spend his whole life finding people like that and holding on. And the next time something found him, it came not from the outside, but from somewhere deep inside his own memory, in a moment that would reveal more about who Homer really was than almost anything else the show ever tried. Section 8. The Night He Almost Jumped. Eternal Moonshine and Homer's Inner Life. Not every great Homer Simpson episode is built around a big adventure or a wild scheme that takes him somewhere unexpected. Some of the most revealing things the show ever did with the character were quieter than that. Some of the best episodes about Homer are the ones that put him in a situation where the noise stops and the jokes slow down, and you are suddenly looking at what is actually inside this man, at the thoughts he has about himself and the people he loves and the life he has built. The season 19 episode called Eternal Moonshine of the Simpson Mind is that kind of episode, and it is one of the most important pieces of the entire show. The episode won the Emmy Award for Outstanding Animated Program in 2008. Al Jean, who served as the showrunner for The Simpsons across many of its seasons and oversaw more episodes than almost anyone else in the show's history, selected it as one of 5 episodes he considered truly essential to understanding what the show was. Not 5 funny episodes, 5 essential ones. There is a difference, and the fact that this particular episode made that list tells you something about what it is doing. It begins in winter. Snow is falling on Springfield. The episode opens by moving through the town as people wake up and start their day, and eventually it finds Homer. He is outside. He is face down in a pile of snow. He has been there all night. He wakes up slowly, pulls himself out of the cold, and realizes he has absolutely no memory of what happened the day before. Not fragments, not blurry pieces, nothing. The previous 24 hours are completely gone. He goes home. The house is empty. Marge is not there. The kids are not there. The only living thing in the house is Santa's little helper, the family dog. And the dog is not happy to see him. The dog growls and snaps at Homer, which is unusual behavior for an animal that is normally friendly toward the family. Homer manages to get away from him and looks around the house trying to find any clue about what happened. He goes to Moe's Tavern, because Moe's is where Homer goes when he needs information about what he was doing the night before. Moe tells him that Homer came in the previous evening and asked for something called a forget-me-shot. Moe explains what the drink is. It is a mixture of several very strong ingredients, including the venom of a specific kind of moth, and its effect is to erase the last 24 hours of memory from whoever drinks it. Homer came in, drank it deliberately, and left. He wanted to forget something. Moe does not know what. Then Chief Wiggum, who happens to be in the tavern, adds the piece of information that changes everything. Wiggum tells Homer that he was called to the Simpson house the previous night for a domestic disturbance. The call was made by Ned Flanders, who had heard something concerning from next door. When Wiggum arrived, he found Marge with a black eye. She told him she had walked into a door. The call was logged, the situation was noted, and Wiggum left. Homer receives a partial flash of memory. He sees Marge in the image, and she is asking him to stop doing something. Her eye is in pain. She is upset. This is the moment the episode builds everything on. Homer looks at these fragments and draws the worst possible conclusion about himself. He does not arrive there dramatically or loudly. He arrives there quietly, in the specific way that someone arrives at a terrible thought when they are alone and frightened and not sure what they are capable of. He concludes that he hurt Marge, that he came home and did something to her, that the person he loves more than anything in the world, the person who is the center of his entire life, has a black eye because of him. He goes to Grandpa Simpson for help because Grandpa is old and Homer thinks old people might have wisdom about remembering things. Grandpa does not have a useful solution, but he does mention that Professor Frink, the town's resident scientist, has developed a machine that can help people look back through their own memories. Homer goes to Frink's laboratory and is connected to the machine. What follows is the visual centerpiece of the episode, and it is one of the most remarkable sequences the show ever produced. Homer moves through his own memories the way a person moves through a room full of photographs, except the photographs are moving and they are his entire life. Thousands of images from his past flash by, pulled from real episodes across the show's history, years and years of Homer's life compressed into a rush of pictures. You see him young, you see him older, you see the moments the show has already covered and moments that exist only in the spaces between episodes. It is Homer's life as a complete thing, laid out all at once, and the effect of watching it is something the show's comedy alone never quite achieves. It is the feeling of a life being real. Homer navigates through these memories trying to find the specific one he needs. In the process, he takes Bart and Lisa, represented as versions of themselves pulled from his memory, with him as guides. Bart immediately uses the access to Homer's childhood memories to have himself beat up 10-year-old Homer and then 20-year-old Homer, because Bart is Bart even inside Homer's head. During this detour, the memory of Homer's first kiss is accidentally destroyed, and Bart tells Homer it was with Apu, which is almost certainly not true, but which Homer has no way to disprove in the moment. Eventually, they find the memory Homer is looking for. He sees himself coming home the previous evening and finding Marge with another person in the house. The other person's face is blocked by a bottle that is sitting in the foreground of the memory. Marge, in the memory, tells Homer she did not want him to find out about this. Homer interprets this as confirmation that Marge was meeting with someone secretly, that something was happening that she had been hiding from him, and that he reacted to this discovery by hurting her. He is convinced he is the kind of man who would do that. This is one of the most quietly devastating things the episode reveals about Homer. Not that he hurt Marge, because he did not, but that when faced with the possibility, he believes it. He believes it because underneath all the confidence and the noise and the big personality, there is a version of Homer who is not sure he is a good man. There is a version of him that has carried, since childhood, the quiet suspicion that he is the kind of person who eventually ruins things. The farm, Herb's company, every job he has ever held. He has always been capable of causing damage without meaning to. The question of whether the damage goes further than that is one he has never been fully sure of the answer to. He decides his life is not worth continuing. He goes to the one bridge in Springfield, the bridge that overlooks the water, and he stands at the edge of it. He begins to reconsider. He is standing there, genuinely questioning whether to go through with it, when Patty and Selma arrive. They have been walking nearby and they see him on the bridge. Without hesitation, without asking what is happening, they push him off. Homer falls, and while he is falling, in the seconds between the bridge and the water below, his life flashes before his eyes. The show presents this as another rapid sequence, similar to the memory machine sequence but different in feeling. This one moves forward through time rather than backward and sideways through memory. It shows Homer being born, being a child, being a young man, meeting Marge, having children, growing older, year by year by year. It is fast, and it is made up of still images, and set against quiet music, it becomes one of the most unexpectedly moving things the show ever put together. You see the hard childhood, You see the boy without a mother. You see the young man who had no idea what he was doing. You see the husband. You see the father holding each of his babies. You see the middle-aged man at the desk in Sector 7G. You see the whole life. And while he is falling through that life, the memory he has been trying to reach finally unlocks. The full picture comes back to him at last. The previous evening, Homer had come home and found Marge in the living room. She was not having a secret meeting. She was organizing a surprise party for him, planning the decorations and the details with Duffman, who works for the Duff Beer Company and who had been hired to help make the event special. That was the person whose face was hidden by the bottle in the memory. That was what Marge had not wanted Homer to find out about. Homer, excited about the party, had grabbed a bottle of something to celebrate. When he tried to open it, the cork shot out and hit Marge directly in the eye. That was where the black eye came from. A cork from a bottle, fired by accident, by a man who was happy and celebrating and not paying attention to where he was aiming. And then Homer, feeling terrible that he had stumbled into the surprise that Marge had put so much effort into keeping secret, had gone to Moe's Tavern and asked for the forget-me shot. He had deliberately erased his own memory of the entire day so that he could still be genuinely surprised at his own party. He had chosen to walk through the terror and confusion and self-examination of not knowing what he had done so that Marge could have the moment she had planned for him. He lands on the party boat that Marge had rented for the celebration. Everyone is there. The whole thing is revealed, and Homer is genuinely, completely surprised because he has no memory of finding out about it. The party happens. It is a good night, but the episode does not let that happy ending be the only thing you take away from it. The thing that stays, the thing that the episode is really about, is what happened between the bridge and the boat. It is the image of Homer falling and seeing his whole life go past him and realizing in that fall that the life he was falling away from was worth holding on to. It is the revelation that he pushed himself into that fall willingly, in a roundabout way, because he was so committed to giving Marge a perfect surprise that he chose confusion and potential self-destruction over spoiling her night. Homer's love for Marge is not always expressed in ways that are easy to see. He is not eloquent. He does not always notice the things that need noticing. He forgets anniversaries. He makes decisions that affect the whole family without asking anyone. He is, by any objective measure, a difficult person to be married to. But the Eternal Moonshine episode strips all of that away and shows what is underneath it, which is a love so complete that Homer would rather stand on a bridge and fear the worst about himself than let the woman he loves lose one carefully planned evening. The episode also reveals, in the sequence where Homer moves through his childhood memories, several important things about his past that the show had built up across many years. He failed the second grade, shown briefly in the life montage. His eating got noticeably worse after his mother left, reinforcing what Season 19's Mona Leavesa would later say directly about the connection between Mona's disappearance and Homer's relationship with food. He learned to be unaware of painful things as a way of surviving a home where painful things were happening regularly. He built, from a very young age, a wall between himself and full understanding, and that wall served him for decades and also cost him something he never fully got back. The episode ends with Homer at his surprise party, surrounded by his family and friends, with no memory of the terror he just walked through to get there. He is happy. He is exactly where he is supposed to be. And it is worth remembering, as a final note on this particular chapter of Homer's story, that the life he saw flashing past him on the way down included more than 188 different jobs. More work than almost any other character in the history of television animation. He has been so many things, tried so many different versions of himself, and kept coming back to the same desk in Sector 7G and the same family in the same house on Evergreen Terrace. Quote 12 __. The jobs are the next part of the story, and there are so many of them that the only way to understand what they mean is to look at all of them together and ask what they say about a man who could not stop trying to be something different, even when the thing he already was turned out to be enough. Section 9. 188 Jobs. The Working Life of Homer Simpson. Over the first 400 episodes of The Simpsons, Homer Simpson held more than 188 different jobs. This number has been confirmed by the show itself, and it represents something that no other animated character in television history had done up to that point. 188 jobs across a career that keeps returning again and again to the same desk in the same building with the same blinking lights and the same boss who cannot remember his name. The jobs are not random. They are not just a list of funny situations the writers invented week by week. When you look at them together as a complete picture of how Homer has spent his working life, they reveal something very specific about who he is and what he is always looking for. The thing Homer is always looking for, across every job he has ever taken, is the feeling he had at the bowling alley. That brief period when he worked at Barney's Bowlorama as a pin monkey before Maggie's arrival made it impossible to stay, is the measuring stick against which every other job in his life is quietly measured. He was happy there. Not performing happiness, not convincing himself it was fine. Actually, genuinely, simply happy. He liked the sound of the place. He liked the people. He liked the work. He liked that the work made sense to him, and that he was good at it, and that nobody expected more from him than what he was able to give. Every job he takes after losing the bowling alley, whether he knows it or not, is an attempt to find that feeling again. The nuclear plant is where he keeps ending up. It is his gravitational center, the thing he orbits no matter how far out he goes. He has been fired from it and rehired to it more times than the show ever bothers to count. In the early seasons, episodes would often take the time to explain how he lost the job and then got it back. In later seasons, the show simply stopped explaining it, because the pattern was so well established that it needed no justification. Homer always comes back to Sector 7G. The bowling alley was the dream, the plant is the reality. His very first significant job outside the plant is also one of his most beloved. In the Season 4 episode called Marge vs. the Monorail, a fast-talking and deeply dishonest salesman named Lyle Lanley arrives in Springfield and convinces the entire town that what it needs, more than anything else, is a monorail. Springfield has just received a large sum of money from a fine paid by Mr. Burns, and the town is debating how to spend it responsibly. Lanley, through a song and a performance of extraordinary persuasion, convinces them to build a monorail instead. Homer, swept up in the excitement of the whole thing, applies to be the conductor and gets the job. He has never operated a monorail. He has never operated anything that moves people through the air on a track. He is given what amounts to almost no training, placed in the conductor's position, and sent off with a full car of passengers. The monorail immediately begins to malfunction. It speeds up and cannot be slowed down. Springfield's residents watch from below as Homer pilots a runaway vehicle through the sky above their town. Homer saves the day by using a large donut statue as an anchor, hooking it to the monorail and dragging it to a stop. The vehicle is saved, the passengers are safe. Later investigation reveals that Lyle Lanley had conned the town, taking most of the money Springfield paid him and running, leaving behind a monorail that was poorly built and dangerous. The people of Springfield had been fooled completely, and the only thing that prevented the day from ending in catastrophe was Homer making an improvised decision involving a donut, which is perhaps the most Homer Simpson solution to a crisis that the show ever produced. In the Season 4 episode called Homer the Heretic, Homer skips church and discovers that staying home alone is one of the most enjoyable experiences of his life. The episode is not about a job, but it leads into a season that features one of the most significant career detours in Homer's history, the episode Deep Space Homer, which aired in Season 5. NASA, the American Space Agency, has become concerned that the public no longer finds astronauts interesting. Focus groups conducted by the agency reveal that regular people find astronauts too competent and too polished, and that this competence actually makes them difficult to relate to. NASA decides to solve this problem by sending an ordinary person into space, someone that regular Americans can see themselves in. They run a competition between Homer and Barney Gumble. Barney, who turns out to have exceptional physical abilities and quick intelligence when he is sober, is the better candidate in almost every measurable way. Then Barney is given a drink of champagne to celebrate his likely selection, and he immediately goes back to being Barney, and Homer gets the job. Homer goes to space. He brings potato chips with him, which he releases into the zero-gravity environment of the spacecraft, creating a floating cloud of chips that drifts through the cabin and gets into the controls. The resulting problems with the mission nearly end in disaster. Homer eventually saves the shuttle using a makeshift tool he puts together from materials that were not intended for that purpose. He returns to Earth as a hero. The celebration does not last long. It never does. Within a day or two, Springfield has moved on. In the Season 4 episode called Mr. Plow, Homer sees a snowplow being demonstrated on television and, in the specific way that Homer makes major financial decisions, buys one immediately without thinking it through. He starts a snowplow business called Mr. Plow, with a jingle and a commercial and a leather jacket that has the name on the back. The business is immediately successful because Springfield gets a significant amount of snow and there is genuine demand for what Homer is offering. He even gets a call from the mayor's office, which leads to him receiving a key to the city. The success does not last because Barney Gumble, inspired by Homer's achievement, starts a competing business called the Plow King and uses a larger vehicle and more aggressive marketing to take Homer's customers away. Homer, in response, sends Barney on a fake job to a mountain road during a dangerous storm, hoping Barney will be unable to complete it. Barney gets stuck on the mountain in the blizzard and is in genuine danger. Homer feels terrible and goes to rescue him. He does. The business eventually ends when a warm front melts all the snow in Springfield and neither of them has anything to plow anymore. In the Season 5 episode called Homer and Apu, Homer is caught on camera eating spoiled meat from the Quickie Mart and exposing Apu's practice of selling food that has gone bad. Apu loses his job as a result of the media attention. Homer, feeling guilty, agrees to help Apu get his job back. This is not exactly a new career for Homer, but it involves him briefly working at the Quickie Mart, where he performs with his usual level of competence, which is to say, very little. One of the most beloved single-episode careers Homer ever had is explored in the Season 8 episode called You Only Move Twice, in which Homer is recruited by a company called Globex Corporation and moves his entire family to a planned community called Cypress Creek. His new employer is a man named Hank Scorpio, and Scorpio is one of the most warmly remembered guest characters in the show's history. He is energetic, supportive, genuinely interested in his employees as people, and deeply committed to Homer's success and happiness. He is also, as the episode makes clear through a series of escalating details, a supervillain who is in the process of taking over the eastern seaboard of the United States. Homer has no idea that Scorpio is a villain. Homer is simply having the best working experience of his life. Scorpio remembers his name. Scorpio asks him how things are going. Scorpio gives him real responsibility and trusts him to handle it. When Homer mentions casually that he has always wanted a hammock, Scorpio gets him a hammock. The job itself is wonderful. The rest of the family is miserable. Marge has nothing to do in the planned community because everything is taken care of for her. Bart is placed in a special class at school after tests reveal learning difficulties and is separated from the other students. Lisa is allergic to everything in the new environment and cannot stop sneezing. Homer, who is loving his job, cannot see past his own happiness to notice that his family is suffering. Eventually, Homer realizes that the family needs to go back to Springfield. He tells Scorpio he has to leave. Scorpio, who has by this point completed his takeover of the eastern seaboard, tells Homer he understands and thanks him genuinely for his work. As a farewell gift, Scorpio arranges for Homer to receive ownership of the Denver Broncos, the professional football team. Homer had mentioned at some point that he always wanted to own a professional sports team. The Broncos are not the team he wanted. He wanted the Dallas Cowboys. He keeps this to himself and does not tell Scorpio. In the Season 7 episode called Homer Palooza, Homer discovers that he has an unusual ability. He can take a cannonball to the stomach without being seriously hurt. He joins a traveling music festival as a performer, absorbing cannonball impacts for audiences who are entertained by the spectacle. The job lasts until a doctor informs Homer that his stomach has developed a growth as a result of the repeated impacts, and that continuing will eventually kill him. Homer quits. In the Season 8 episode called Homer versus the 18th Amendment, Springfield introduces a law banning alcohol after a series of events connected to a St. Patrick's Day parade. Homer, who cannot function without access to beer, becomes a bootlegger. He moves alcohol illegally through the town's underground pipe system, operating under the name Beer Baron and supplying Moe's Tavern and its customers. He is remarkably good at this job, better than he is at most things he does professionally. He is eventually caught when the federal agent sent to enforce the Prohibition law tracks him down, but the Prohibition law itself is then repealed on a technicality, making Homer's crimes retroactively legal. In the Season 4 episode called Duffless, and in several episodes surrounding it, the show builds out the portrait of Homer's relationship with Duff beer and with alcohol more generally. Homer's drinking is not treated as a simple character quirk across the show's history. It is connected to his childhood, to Barney's influence in high school, to the social world of Moe's Tavern that gives Homer a community of friends outside his family. When he briefly gives up drinking for a month in Duffless, the change in him is noticeable. He becomes more present, more engaged, more aware of the world around him. Then the month ends. In the Season 9 episode called The City of New York versus Homer Simpson, Homer is required to travel to New York City to retrieve his car, which Barney left there and which has been clamped for parking violations. The episode is not primarily about a job, but it reveals that Homer has a significant and specific hatred of New York City, connected to a bad experience he had there years before, details of which the episode provides through flashback. In the Season 10 episode called Viva Ned Flanders, Homer reveals that he has been collecting his senior discount at various Springfield businesses despite not being a senior. He has been lying about his age to get cheaper prices, which is exactly the kind of minor, sustained dishonesty that Homer is capable of when the reward is concrete and the chance of getting caught feels low. Across all these jobs and all these seasons, the pattern is consistent. Homer sees an opportunity, pursues it with complete enthusiasm and very little preparation, achieves some degree of success that surprises everyone, including himself, and then something goes wrong, usually because of a decision Homer makes that he did not think through, and the whole thing ends. He goes back to the plant. He goes back to Sector 7G. He sits down at the console with the photos of Maggie covering the plaque above his head. What all these jobs share underneath the comedy is the quality of Homer's desire. He is not a lazy man in the way that word is usually meant. He does not lack energy or enthusiasm or the willingness to throw himself into something. What he lacks is the ability to sustain that energy past the point where it becomes difficult, and the foresight to see where his choices are heading before they get there. Every job he takes is a genuine attempt at something better, at a version of his life that feels more like the bowling alley and less like the plant. He just cannot hold on to it. Before we move on, if you're enjoying this analysis, please consider subscribing. It helps the channel tremendously. And of all the things Homer was unable to hold on to, and of all the situations in which his inability to see around corners caused serious damage to people who trusted him, nothing came close in scale to what happened in the summer of 2007, when Homer's failure to think past the moment he was in managed to trap an entire town under a glass dome. Section 10. The Dome, the Pig, and the Man Who Had to Save What He Broke, The Simpsons Movie. By the time the summer of 2007 arrived, The Simpsons had been on television for 18 seasons. It had aired more than 400 episodes. It had won 23 Emmy Awards. It had won a Peabody Award. Time magazine had named it the best television show of the 20th century. It had been running continuously, without a single break in seasons, since December of 1989, which meant that Homer Simpson had been showing up in American living rooms every year for nearly 2 decades. The show had outlasted predictions, outlasted trends, outlasted entire networks worth of competing programs, and showed no signs of stopping. And yet, in all that time, across all those episodes, Homer Simpson had never been on a movie screen. The Simpsons movie changed that on July 27, 2007, when it opened in cinemas around the world. It had taken an extraordinarily long time to get there. The script went through more than 150 different drafts over the course of its development, written and rewritten by 11 of the show's most experienced writers, including Matt Groening, Al Jean, James L. Brooks, Mike Scully, David Merkin, and others who had shaped the series across its history. The film was directed by David Silverman, who had been one of the show's supervising directors for years and knew the characters and their world completely. When it was finally released, it earned more than $536 million at the worldwide box office, making it one of the highest-earning animated films up to that point. At the center of it all, as it always had to be, was Homer Simpson doing something he should not have done, and then having to find a way to fix it. The trouble begins with a pig. Early in the film, Homer is at Krusty Burger when he sees that a pig is about to be taken away to be killed. The pig has been used in one of Krusty's advertisements, and now that the filming is done, the people running the restaurant have no further use for it. Homer, who cannot watch an animal be treated badly without doing something about it, takes the pig. He carries it home. He names it Spider Pig. He loves it immediately and completely, with the specific, all-consuming devotion that Homer brings to anything that makes him genuinely happy in the present moment. He carries Spider Pig around the house. He holds it up to the ceiling and walks it across the surface while singing a short song about Spider Pig, adapting the melody from a well-known superhero theme. He is, in these scenes, purely joyful in the way that Homer is purely joyful before consequences have had time to arrive. Spider Pig produces a significant amount of waste. Homer collects this waste in a large silo that sits in the backyard. The silo fills up very quickly within 2 days, partly because of the pig and partly because Homer himself contributes to it. The silo is full and needs to be taken to the proper waste management facility to be disposed of safely. At the same time, something important has been happening with Lake Springfield. The lake had become heavily polluted, and Lisa had been leading an effort to convince the town to clean it up and protect it from further damage. She had made presentations, gathered evidence, shown people what was happening to the water, and eventually succeeded in getting Springfield to take the issue seriously. The town passed rules against dumping anything into the lake. The lake was cleaned up. It was, for once, the result of someone doing the right thing and other people listening. Homer loads the silo into his truck and sets off for the waste management facility. Then his phone rings. Lenny calls to tell him that Lard Lad Donuts, a local donut shop, has been shut down for health violations and is giving away all its remaining donuts for free before it closes. Free donuts. Homer hears those two words and everything else stops. He cannot get to the waste management facility fast enough to also get to the free donuts in time. He has to choose, and Homer in this moment does not experience it as a choice at all. It is not even close. He drives to the lake, pulls up at the edge, and dumps the silo directly into the water. The lake, which had just been cleaned at considerable effort and expense, turns black almost immediately. A skull shape appears in the water. A squirrel running along the bank dives in to escape a raccoon and comes back out of the water horribly changed, with what appears to be a large number of extra eyes covering its body. The animal has been transformed by whatever Homer just put into the lake. This mutated squirrel is captured by representatives of the Environmental Protection Agency, the government body responsible for protecting the natural environment, and taken to the agency's headquarters. Russ Cargill, the head of the EPA, uses it as evidence in a presentation to the President of the United States. The president in this film is Arnold Schwarzenegger, the real-world actor and politician, voiced in the film by Harry Shearer. Cargill presents Schwarzenegger with 5 possible responses to the Springfield pollution crisis, each one more drastic than the last. He wants the president to choose one. Schwarzenegger, rather than reading the options or asking any questions about what they involve, selects option 3 at random. He says, in the film's version of his reasoning, that he was elected to lead, not to read. Option 3 involves sealing the entire town of Springfield inside an enormous glass dome, cutting it off completely from the rest of the country so that the pollution cannot spread further. A giant dome is lowered over Springfield from above, while the residents watch in disbelief. The dome covers everything. No one can get in, no one can get out. The air inside will last for a while, and the town has whatever food and supplies were already there. But the people of Springfield are trapped. They are sealed inside their own town, like something kept in a jar. When the police find Homer's silo at the bottom of the lake with his name and address on the back of it, the situation in the dome gets much worse. The entire town of Springfield, all of the residents, the people Homer has lived alongside for his entire adult life, understand immediately that this is his fault. The dome is there because Homer dumped the silo. The lake is ruined because Homer could not resist free donuts. The town is a prison because of one decision made in a fraction of a second by a man who was thinking about pastry. More than 320 Springfield characters, nearly every named and recognizable face from the show's long history, form an angry crowd and descend on the Simpson house. They are not coming to have a conversation. Homer looks out the window and sees the entirety of Springfield moving toward him and understands that he has, this time, created a problem larger than any he has managed before. Maggie has been quietly exploring a sinkhole that appeared in the backyard sandbox. She finds that it leads to the outside of the dome. The family escapes through the sinkhole just before the crowd reaches the house. They come up on the other side of the dome and run. Homer has a plan. He has, apparently, always had a plan for situations in which Springfield turned against him, because Homer is the kind of person who considers that a possibility worth preparing for. The plan is Alaska. He wants to go to Alaska, start over, leave Springfield and everything that has happened there behind, and build a new life somewhere nobody knows them. On the way to Alaska, the family needs money. Homer enters a carnival competition in which contestants attempt to ride a motorcycle around the inside of a large metal sphere without falling. It is the kind of stunt that requires skill and nerve. Homer is helped through it by Lisa, and he completes enough rounds to win the prize. The family uses this to fund the journey north. They arrive in Alaska. Homer is happy. He has a cabin. There is wilderness outside the window. There are no angry mobs. There is no dome. There is no silo and no lake and no consequence visible in any direction. He is content in a way that he rarely gets to be, and the film takes a moment to show him simply sitting with that contentment. The rest of the family is not content at all. They can see what Homer cannot or will not see. Springfield is still under the dome. The people they love, the friends and neighbors they have known for years, are trapped in there. The dome is running out of the things a town needs to function. The situation is getting worse, and the man responsible for all of it is sitting in an Alaskan cabin being satisfied with himself. Marge tries to talk Homer into going back. She explains what is happening, what will happen if no one intervenes, what their responsibility is to the people they left behind. Homer refuses. The people of Springfield tried to kill his family. They came to his house with the clear intention of doing serious harm. He is finished with them, and he does not believe they deserve his help. The family leaves him. One by one, then all at once, they go. They are going back to Springfield, with or without Homer, because that is who they are. Homer wakes up in the cabin alone. The family is gone. The wilderness is outside. He has the peace and freedom he said he wanted, and it is unbearable. Then a local woman, who is a traditional healer, takes Homer through a vision, a spiritual experience that shows him a truth about himself that he has been avoiding. The vision shows Homer that he has spent his whole life running away from doing the right thing until it was almost too late, and that this has been the central pattern of his existence for as long as he can remember. The vision does not tell him what to do. It just shows him who he has been, clearly and without softening it. Homer sees himself. He sets out across the frozen landscape to find his family. He crosses difficult terrain alone and manages to get to Springfield before the situation becomes completely beyond saving. His family has been captured by the EPA and is being held. Cargill has by this point talked the president into ordering the complete destruction of Springfield. A bomb is being lowered into the dome, set to go off and wipe out everything inside. Homer and Bart, who have been at odds for most of the film in the specific way Homer and Bart are at odds when Homer is being particularly selfish and Bart is observing it clearly, work together. They had earlier in the film practiced a stunt at the carnival involving a motorcycle going around the inside of a sphere, and they use that experience now. Homer rides a motorcycle around the inner surface of the dome, building speed. Bart, riding with him, throws the bomb through the small hole in the dome's surface just in time. The bomb detonates outside the dome. The dome shatters. Springfield is free. Cargill arrives personally with a weapon, intending to deal with Homer directly. He does not get the chance. Maggie, who has been watching from nearby, pushes a large boulder off the ledge above him. It hits Cargill and takes him out of the situation. The baby who was shot by accident at Maggie's birth by Homer in the very first pages of the family's story has now saved her father's life in the climax of the biggest adventure they have ever had. Springfield rebuilds. The dome is gone. The family is together. The townspeople, who had been ready to do serious harm to Homer at the film's start, welcome the family back because Homer did the thing he needed to do. He came back. He fixed what he broke. Late and imperfect, and only after being shown in a vision what he already knew, but he came back. The film ends where the show always ends, with the family together, with Springfield intact, with Homer having created a disaster and then found his way through it. It is, in miniature, the complete story of Homer Simpson, the whole arc of it compressed into 107 minutes of animation. __quote_14___. But there was still more to be revealed about who Homer was on the inside, in the parts of himself he could never quite put into words. And the episode that came closest to saying those things out loud would arrive later that same year, in the winter, in the snow, when Homer woke up with no memory of the day before and had to walk back through his entire life to find out who he really was. Section 11. The Man Who Erased Himself, Eternal Moonshine, and What Homer Found Inside. There are two kinds of Simpsons episodes. There are the ones that make you laugh, and there are the ones that make you feel something you were not expecting to feel when you sat down to watch a cartoon. The season 19 episode called Eternal Moonshine of the Simpson Mind is the second kind. It is the episode that Al Jean, who ran the show for more seasons than almost anyone else in its history, selected as one of only 5 episodes he considered truly essential to understanding what The Simpsons was. It won the Emmy Award for Outstanding Animated Program in 2008. And at its center is a version of Homer Simpson that the show had been building toward for years, without quite arriving at it until this particular winter evening in Springfield. The episode begins with snow. It is winter in Springfield, and the camera moves slowly through the town as people wake up and begin their day, and eventually it settles on Homer. He is outside. He is lying face down in a pile of snow. He has been there all night. He wakes up slowly, pushes himself out of the cold, and stands up in the early morning light with absolutely no memory of what happened the day before. He goes home. The house is empty. Marge is not there. Bart is not there. Lisa and Maggie are not there. The only living thing in the house that he can find is Santa's little helper, the family dog, and the dog wants nothing to do with him. Santa's little helper growls and snaps at Homer, which is not normal behavior from an animal that has lived peacefully with the family for years. Homer gets away from the dog and looks around the empty house, trying to understand what he is seeing. He goes to Moe's Tavern, because when Homer needs to understand what he was doing the night before, Moe's is the first place to look. Moe tells him that Homer came in the previous evening with a specific request. He wanted something called a forget-me shot. Moe explains what it is. It is a mixture of extremely strong ingredients, one of which is the venom of a specific moth, and its only purpose is to erase the last 24 hours of the memory of whoever drinks it. Homer came in, asked for it deliberately, drank it, and left. He wanted to forget something. Moe does not know what. Then Chief Wiggum, who happens to be sitting in the tavern, adds the piece of information that changes everything. Wiggum tells Homer there was a call made to the police the previous night reporting a problem at the Simpson house. The call was made by Ned Flanders, who had heard something alarming from next door. When Wiggum arrived, he found Marge with a black eye. She told him she had walked into a door. The situation was noted, and Wiggum left. Homer receives a fragment of memory at this point, a partial flash of something from the night before. He sees Marge, and she is asking him to stop. Her eye is hurting. She is distressed. What Homer does with this fragment is the heart of the episode. He looks at it, alone, frightened, and he draws the worst conclusion he can imagine about himself. He decides that he hurt Marge. Not by accident. He decides he came home and did something terrible to the woman he loves. He does not arrive at this conclusion loudly or dramatically. He arrives at it quietly, in the way a person arrives at a thought they have been afraid of for a long time. The thought that underneath everything good about them, there is something capable of real damage. He goes to Professor Frink's laboratory, where a machine has been built that allows people to move through their own memories and look at them from the inside. Frink connects Homer to the device, and what follows is one of the most visually impressive sequences the show ever produced. Homer flies through thousands of images from his own past, moments from real episodes across the show's long history, every age and every period of his life laid out in a single rushing stream. You see him as a baby. You see him as a small child without a mother. You see him meeting Marge. You see the family being built piece by piece. You see the plaque in Sector 7G. You see the whole life, compressed and fast and quietly overwhelming. Homer navigates through these memories with help from Bart and Lisa, who exist in the memory machine as versions of themselves pulled from his mind. Bart, being Bart even inside Homer's head, immediately uses the access to past memories to beat up younger versions of Homer. 10-year-old Homer is beaten by Dream Bart. 20-year-old Homer is also beaten by Dream Bart. The real Homer strangles Dream Bart, and they move on. During this process, the memory of Homer's first kiss is accidentally destroyed. Bart tells Homer it was with Apu. This is almost certainly not true, but Homer has no way to check. They find the memory Homer is looking for. He sees himself from the previous evening, coming home and walking in on Marge with another person in the house. The other person's face is blocked by a bottle sitting in the front of the scene. Marge, in the memory, says she did not want Homer to find out about this. Homer reads this as evidence that something was happening that Marge had been hiding from him, and that he had reacted to discovering it by hurting her. He is so certain of this conclusion that he makes a decision. He goes to the bridge at the edge of Springfield, the same bridge that appears in earlier episodes during Homer's darkest moments, and he stands at the edge of it. He is not performing distress. He genuinely believes he is the kind of man who hurts the people he loves, and he genuinely believes that a man like that does not deserve to keep going. He begins to reconsider. He is standing there weighing things, pulling back from the edge, when Patty and Selma appear. They have been walking nearby. They see Homer on the bridge, and without asking what is happening or why he is there, they push him off. Homer falls, and while he is falling, between the bridge and the water below, his life flashes before his eyes. It is not like the memory machine sequence. That one moved sideways through time, following threads and branches. This one moves forward, from the very beginning to right now. Homer as a newborn. Homer as a small boy on the farm. Homer in high school, already drinking. Homer meeting Marge in detention. Homer holding each of his babies for the first time. Homer at the desk in Sector 7G with the photographs of Maggie over the plaque. Homer year by year by year, growing older, the whole life moving past in less than a minute. And while he falls through this life, while every year he has ever lived goes past him in seconds, the memory that was blocked finally opens. He sees the full truth of what happened the previous evening. He came home and found Marge in the living room. She was not meeting anyone in secret. She was planning a surprise birthday party for him. The other person whose face was hidden by the bottle was Duff Man, a promotional character for the Duff Beer Company, who Marge had hired to help make the party special. That was what she had not wanted Homer to find out about. A party. A celebration she had spent time and effort and care putting together for him. Homer, in his excitement about the party, grabbed a bottle to celebrate. He tried to open it, and the cork fired out and hit Marge directly in the eye. That was the black eye. That was the domestic disturbance Ned Flanders heard. A champagne cork, fired by accident by a man who was happy and not watching where the bottle was pointing. And then Homer, feeling genuinely terrible that he had stumbled into the surprise and ruined the secret Marge had worked so hard to keep, went to Moe's Tavern and asked for the forget-me shot. so that he could still be surprised, so that Marge could still have the moment she had planned. He walked himself into a full day of terror and confusion and the worst thoughts a person can have about themselves, deliberately, so that his wife's party would not be spoiled. He lands on the boat Marge rented for the celebration. Everyone is there. The party happens. Homer is genuinely, completely surprised because he has no memory of finding out about it. It is a good night. But what stays after the episode ends, what the writers clearly intended to stay, is not the party. It is the fall. It is the image of Homer dropping from the bridge and seeing his whole life go past him, and the specific feeling that image produces, which is the feeling of a life that was worth living, even when the person living it could not always see that clearly. The episode reveals, in the memory machine sequence, several things about Homer's past that connect to everything the show had built across its history. He had failed the second grade, held back because he could not keep up. His eating had become noticeably worse after his mother left, the hunger that was never really about food. He had learned very young to be unaware of painful things as a way of surviving a home where painful things were regular. He built a wall between himself and full understanding, and he has been living behind that wall ever since. What the Eternal Moonshine episode does, more than almost any other single episode in the show's history, is make the argument that Homer Simpson is not a fool. He is not simply the bumbling, oblivious man the show often presents him as in its lighter moments. He is a person carrying a great deal of old damage, who has chosen, perhaps without fully understanding the choice, to face the world without defenses. Every impulsive decision, every scheme that ends in chaos, every moment where Homer runs towards something without looking at where his feet are landing, comes from a man who learned early that the careful, thoughtful approach to life did not protect you from losing the things you loved. His mother was careful and thoughtful, and she still had to leave. So Homer went the other way. He stopped being careful. He stopped looking ahead. He just moved, as fast and as loud as he could, toward whatever was in front of him. And the people he moved toward, his family, his friends, Marge above everyone, absorbed a great deal of the mess that created. But they also got the other thing that came with it, which was a love so complete and so unconditional that Homer would erase himself rather than take one good moment away from the person he loved most. __quote _15___. That is who Homer Simpson is, underneath everything. And understanding who he is makes the final chapter of his story, the part about what he means and why anyone is still watching after all this time, feel like something worth sitting with. Section 12. What Homer Means. The Legacy of an Accidental Icon. There is a line that a professor named Robert Thompson said in a 2003 interview that has been repeated many times in the years since, because it refuses to stop being interesting. Thompson was the director of the Center for the Study of Popular Television at Syracuse University, which means his entire professional life was built around taking television seriously as a subject worth studying. He said that 3 centuries from now, English professors will be looking at Homer Simpson as one of the greatest creations in the history of human storytelling. 3 centuries, not 3 decades, 3 centuries. That is an extraordinary thing to say about a cartoon character who eats donuts and falls asleep at a nuclear reactor. And yet the more time passes, the more that statement looks less like an overreach and more like a person simply saying plainly what the evidence already shows. Homer Simpson is, by any honest measure, one of the most recognized fictional characters who has ever existed. Not one of the most recognized animated characters, one of the most recognized fictional characters, period, across all of storytelling in all its forms. More people around the world can identify Homer Simpson on sight than can identify characters from books that have been taught in schools for hundreds of years. That is not a small thing. That is a genuinely remarkable fact about a man who was sketched in a lobby in 5 minutes in 1987. The formal recognition of Homer's place in culture came from many directions and kept coming for decades. In 2007, USA Today placed Homer Simpson on their list of the 25 most influential people of the past 25 years. The word they used was people, not characters, not fictional figures, people. He was on a list alongside scientists and world leaders and artists. And the reasoning given was that he had shaped the way an entire generation thought about humor, about imperfection, and about the gap between who we say we are and who we actually are when nobody is watching. Entertainment Weekly ranked him first on their list of the greatest characters of the last 20 years in 2010. Not the greatest animated character, the greatest character across all of television in all its forms over a 20-year period. The Sunday Times called him the greatest comic creation of modern time. TV Guide named him the second greatest cartoon character ever made, behind only Bugs Bunny, in a 2002 poll. In 2000, the Simpson family received a star on the Hollywood Walk of Fame, becoming the first animated family ever to be honored that way. His catchphrase, the frustrated grunt that sounds like "doh," became the only catchphrase from a cartoon character to be added to a major English dictionary while the show was still actively airing. It entered the New Oxford Dictionary of English in 1998 and the Oxford English Dictionary in 2001. Language experts noted that the word had entered genuine common use, that people were saying "doh" in real life in response to their own mistakes, and that this had happened fast enough and completely enough to qualify as a real word rather than a pop culture reference. A sound that Dan Castellaneta invented by lowering his chin to his chest and letting his intelligence drop became a permanent part of the English language. Dan Castellaneta himself won 4 Primetime Emmy Awards for voicing Homer. 4 separate times, the television industry's highest honor for performance recognized what Castellaneta was doing with this character as work deserving of the most formal acknowledgement it could give. The show as a whole won 23 Emmy Awards across its run, along with a Peabody Award, which is given to recognize work that serves the public good through broadcasting. Time magazine naming it the best television show of the 20th century was not a casual compliment. It was the considered judgment of people whose job it was to think carefully about what television had produced and what of it would last. Homer has appeared in every single episode of The Simpsons. Every one. Across more than 35 years of television, across more than 750 episodes as of the show's continued run, Homer has been present in all of them. He is the only character the show has never been without. Every other character, no matter how beloved, has episodes they do not appear in. Homer does not. He is the fixed point around which everything else turns. Over the first 400 episodes alone, he held more than 188 different jobs. He went to space, he saved Springfield from a full nuclear meltdown by pressing a random button while reciting a counting rhyme. He ran a snowplow business, a beer smuggling operation, a car design project that destroyed his brother's company, and an internet business he called CompuGlobal HyperMegaNet. He worked for a supervillain named Hank Scorpio and had no idea the man was a supervillain. He survived being mauled by a badger, falling down Springfield Gorge multiple times, being hit by a cannonball repeatedly, and eating a piece of improperly prepared blowfish that should have killed him. He went to the top of a glass dome on a motorcycle and threw a bomb through a hole to save the town he had accidentally trapped. He had a crayon removed from his brain, became significantly smarter, bonded with Lisa in a way they had never managed before, and then had the crayon put back in because being smarter made him miserable. He has a skull that is 1/4 of an inch thicker than the average human skull, which the show has referred to as Homer Simpson syndrome, and which explains in the show's own internal logic why he is able to survive the kind of physical punishment that would permanently damage a normal person. A study of more than 2,500 middle-aged people in France searching for a connection between weight and brain function actually used the name Homer Simpson syndrome in their findings, which is the specific kind of real-world impact that happens when a fictional character has been embedded in the culture deeply enough that scientists start using his name to describe medical observations. What critics and writers and academics have been trying to articulate for decades, the thing that makes Homer more than just a funny character, comes down to something the show understood from its very earliest seasons. Homer Simpson is not a joke. He is a person. He is overweight and often lazy and frequently oblivious. He is a borderline alcoholic who has been drunk on screen more times than most shows would ever allow their main character to be. He has strangled his son. He has cost his brother everything. He has trapped his entire hometown under a glass dome because he wanted free donuts. He has made, across 35 years of episodes, an almost uncountable number of decisions that ranged from unwise to genuinely harmful. By any external measurement, he is a failure in most of the categories that society uses to judge a man. And yet the show never lets you forget what is underneath all of that. The boy on the farm who scared the cows and didn't mean to. The child who lost his mother and was told she was dead. The teenager who convinced his best friend to drink a beer and accidentally destroyed that friend's future. The young man who walked into his boss's office and promised to be completely spineless because he loved his wife and needed to provide for his baby. The father who covered a cruel plaque with photographs of his youngest daughter so that the only words visible were, "Do it for her." The man who erased his own memory so that Marge's surprise party would not be ruined. He is not getting away with things because life has decided he deserves to. He is moving through his life the way a person moves through a life when they are carrying a great deal of old pain and have chosen, perhaps without understanding the choice, to respond to that pain not by closing down, but by throwing themselves forward, faster and louder and more completely than is probably wise, into everything the world puts in front of them. That choice, that particular response to damage, is what makes Homer feel real to people. It is why a survey of people in the middle of ordinary lives recognizes something in him. It is why the show's writers, who include some of the smartest and most formally educated people ever assembled to write comedy, have consistently said that everyone in the writer's room loves writing for Homer, that his antics come from their own experiences, that he reflects something they recognize in themselves. Homer is, as one writer described him, the most American of the Simpsons. He could not be transplanted into another culture the way the other characters theoretically could. He is specific to a time and a place and a set of values and contradictions that are recognizably particularly American. The belief that the next thing, the next job, the next scheme, the next trip to another state might be the one that finally works out. The deep loyalty to family combined with a consistent failure to show that loyalty in ways the family can clearly see. The love of pleasure and the complete inability to plan past the pleasure of the present moment. The genuine goodness coexisting with regular and serious failure to act on that goodness until the last possible second. All of it adds up to a character who has been on television screens for more than 35 years, who was sketched in a lobby in 5 minutes, who was given a voice by a man who lowered his chin to his chest and let his intelligence drop, and who somehow became one of the most recognized and discussed and studied and loved fictional people in the history of human imagination. Homer J. Simpson. Born May 12, 1956, according to his driver's license, as shown in the Season 4 episode Duffless. Safety Inspector, Springfield Nuclear Power Plant, Sector 7G. Resident of 742 Evergreen Terrace, Springfield. Husband of Marge. Father of Bart, Lisa, and Maggie. Son of Abe and Mona. Half-brother of Herb Powell. Owner of a half-heart-shaped rock he kept for 30 years without knowing why. The man with photographs of his daughter covering a plaque that once said he was there forever, rearranged now to say something different, something better. Do it for her. That is the entire story of Homer Simpson. If you enjoyed this video essay, make sure to subscribe. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.